And we are live. Hey, everybody, this is Roberto Blake, helping you create something awesome today. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are doing a YouTube live thumbnail workshop. We are going to be working in Photoshop today. Sorry to all of you Canva enthusiasts. We're going to be working in Photoshop, the thing that most of the biggest and largest creators use on the YouTube platform. We are doing another workshop Wednesday. For those of you not familiar with the streaming schedule, we do Monetization Mondays to help you learn how to make money as a content creator. We're aiming to get you to $10,000 a month in revenue. We do Workshop Wednesdays to help you with practical skills. And then we do FAQ Fridays to answer all your questions about YouTube strategy, analytics, and overall content ideation. So make sure that you are subscribed and that you are tuning into the streams. Shout out to our sponsors of today's free workshop. Our friends over at Streamyard. Make sure you're checking them out. Links are in the description, or at least they should be. And also, of course, our friends over at OpusClip. Between Streamyard and OpusClip, that's how we're repurposing our content across all platforms. And of course, we are on Kajabi so that we're not digital sharecroppers for the platforms forever and ever and ever. And we're building our own online products, digital products, and membership, and not splitting a commission with the platforms when we do it. So those are all the things. I'm going to make sure that links to everything are in the description down below. I'm going to copy and paste that stuff over to the description so that we can refresh that on the stream. Also, shout out to all of our channel members and shout out to all of our super chatters. Appreciate each and every one of you. We've also got links to our digital download products and to Awesome Creator Academy and some of the resources mentioned here on the stream. We also definitely want to make sure you get the 12-week creator playbook. It is absolutely free. I'm going to be dropping that in the comments here in the live chat for you to get the free creator playbook. You can download that. It's going to help you focus this year, do a 12-week sprint, and it's, of course, linked in the description of the video. So without further ado, let's kind of jump into some of this. We're going to actually be looking at a couple of things. One of the main things we are going to be looking at is going to be Photoshop, which I'm opening up here shortly. Just looking for that screen here in Streamyard so I can share it. So you should be able to see my screen now, and you should be able to see Photoshop in all of its glory. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to adjust it for size here so that's easier to manage. And we're going to zoom in so that you get a sense of this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you first through some of the basics of YouTube thumbnail theory and the Vibes framework. And Vibes stands for visually attractive. I is for interesting at a glance. We call that informs with storytelling. But the easiest way for you guys to remember is interesting at a glance. The B in Vibes is for boldness and contrast. E is for eye-catching elements. And then S is for social proof. Social proof being very important. And we're going to analyze and talk about some of the biggest YouTubers and how they do that. So now you kind of understand how the Vibes framework works. At least I hope you do. You can feel free to ask questions about this. But in terms of basic YouTube thumbnail theory and how we approach YouTube thumbnails, you can kind of see a little bit of my approach to this when you look at and you deconstruct thumbnails that I tend to make. And if I open up a little bit of a more, let's say, a theoretically more complicated thumbnail in Photoshop, I can give you a sense of like how I approach thumbnail designs and how I utilize things like the Vibes framework that I'm talking about. So I'm going to open up one of my thumbnail templates, which, by the way, you may notice I build thumbnail systems for my YouTube channel. So what does that mean? I know I talk about things like brand deals. So what do? I have color, themes, and elements. And how do we break down what I talked about? Boldness and contrast. So we definitely have that in here. We have eye-catching elements like the YouTube logo, We have social proof. We have money here in the thumbnail. We have things that are interesting at a glance. Everyone cares about money. Everyone cares about YouTube. Everyone cares about making 100K. So that's something, and that's just an example of that. Same thing in this other thumbnail. Now, again, I'm not suggesting that these are inherently perfect thumbnails. I'm saying they're intentional and they can be effective for my channel. So effective for my channel isn't meaning a 1 million view video, 100,000 view video. It just means for the niche that I'm in, what's the normal view floor of those type of videos compared to my peers, people like Justin Welsh, for example. What does he pull on a brand deals video? He specializes in brand deals, so that would be important. So if we just look at some elements and some things, one of the reasons that I might decide, okay, I'm going to put myself here on the left instead of the right could be because the YouTube timestamp shows up in the bottom right-hand corner. Maybe I'm worried about my text running into that, but maybe I can go a different route. Maybe if I want to look at these elements, I can go, you know what? That YouTube play button, if I put that in the corner, it's not going to have any problems if I put that in the bottom right-hand corner there, because you'll still be able to see the YouTube logo even with the timestamp. So maybe that's not a problem. So in terms of visual balance and layout, I've got that going on. Now, what about the money? The money aspect here could be some social proof. So what would I do in terms of some of these elements here? If money is social proof, and I don't necessarily absolutely need this huge $sign, but it does maybe play some role, then maybe what I do to communicate this and the social proof is I adjust this in such a way that these elements are there, visually balanced and subtle. And so at a glance, these objects and these things are laid out in an interesting way that tells you the idea. Even without text, the idea is very clear when it comes to this. Now, in terms of fonts, if I decide to use this font that I'm going to go ahead and borrow, I'm going to tell you the fonts that I use. I'm going to show you the fonts I use and why. If I go this route and I decide to lay out my text in this way, and I decided that I'm also going to shrink this text up a little bit, it still can be easy to read, but I'm going to make sure it doesn't run into too much of that $sign there. And so I've created some depth to this. You can still read it. It's still easy to understand what the video is about. We know it's about brand deals. So at a glance, you get the idea of what the video is about. It's visually balanced. It's strong left to right. My text is not going to run to the timestamp on the video. Stands out from the background. It's got contrast. It's got those elements to it. And the thing is, it's easy to understand. It's immediately easy to understand why you should click on this video. So if you see a title that says, hey, I care about brand deals, and you see the money, show me the money. You see a $sign, universal equivalent. You see YouTube. You now, at a glance, without thinking too hard, in less than 2 seconds, understand what this video is about. So it's a visually attractive thumbnail. It's visually balanced. It's interesting at a glance. Hey, why is this guy talking about money and brand deals in YouTube? That's interesting at a glance. You can get the idea. You're informed. Bold, contrast, and text. We've got that. We've got eye-catching elements. Money, YouTube logo. We've got elements. Okay? And then we have social proof in the form of the money itself. And to a degree, you could argue the YouTube logo is a form of social proof. So that's why we use the Vibes framework. The Vibes framework is something I teach in Awesome Creator Academy. It's something that I talk about quite a bit. And if I go to like one of my slides here, and we talk about clickable thumbnails, remember what we said. It's visually attractive. That's the V in Vibes. Informs or is interesting at a glance. That's the I. Bold text and contrast color. That's the B for bold. Eye-catching elements. That's the E. And then social proof. That is the S. And so it all makes sense now. So almost all effective YouTube thumbnails have this in common. Again, thank you to our sponsor, Streamyard, because I see some of you are asking, am I streaming anywhere other than Twitter? Yes, I am. I'm on x.com, formerly Twitter, thanks to Streamyard, twitch.com, kick.com, youtube.com, LinkedIn Live, and Facebook Live. 6 platforms all at once. We've got almost 250 of you in the stream across all platforms. I think we're getting closer and closer to having 100 of you on YouTube, which is not bad for a Wednesday night. So we're doing workshop Wednesdays again. And like I said, share this with a friend. Share this out anywhere you possibly can. We're going to help you with thumbnails. So again, this is all practical advice, and we're showing you how it works. Showing you how all of this more or less works. So in terms of building out your thumbnails, if I were to say I'm going to make a new thumbnail, I either want to make it 1920 by 1080. I can always export it at 12, 80 by 720, so that we have the smaller file size. But YouTube will take 19 by 20 or 1280 by 720. So it'll take either of those, as long as it's in the horizontal format. So we can definitely do that. I want to start with a transparent background. This becomes very important in the long run. So that is going to help us tremendously. Okay. I'm going to see if I have any versions of myself in terms of poses on this particular computer. Hopefully I should, that we can cut out so that I can show you about background removal in Photoshop and why that's important for your thumbnails. So we're going to see if I have poses of myself that we can use so that we can cut those out. If not, I'll probably just download them from my website or from my Canva poses archive, because I do have that somewhere, or I have it in Google Drive. So we'll see. Let's see here. Actually, I have something from a different image, a promotional image, and we can just cut me out of the background here just to show off how this works in Photoshop. So we brought me into this. I was already on background here. We're just going to click remove background. And so, boom, it does that, does a good job. We've removed me from the background. Now, to work in Photoshop, we're going to move a layer below me. We're going to paint that layer black just so that I get a sense of what we're working with here. So this is actually pretty decent. It's near perfect. It's good enough for our purposes. We could always clean this up if we wanted to. We could go in and remove a few of these things in terms of artifacts, but that's not really important here, since what we're going to focus on is we're going to focus on the concept of layouts. And what we're going to do here is some of you may be familiar with the YouTube channel Diary of a CEO. Anybody in the chat familiar with the podcast Diary of a CEO? Anybody? Bueller? You guys familiar with Diary of a CEO at all? Because they have a very simple but effective thumbnail strategy when it comes to YouTube. So I'm going to see if I can share this for you. Diary of a CEO. So their videos, let's share the screen here. Share screen, Diary of a CEO, on YouTube, allow. Okay, so Diary of a CEO. This is their YouTube channel. And as you can see, it uses a very effective branding scheme. And it takes probably one of the most important elements of the thumbnail, uses a black background, and then uses a strong word in a quote with a red background around the text. We're going to recreate this. As simple as this is actually a struggle for a lot of you when it comes to typography, because you don't understand type, you don't understand fonts, and I'm going to help you get a better grasp of this, because it's one of the most important things you can do. So if I go ahead and I share my screen when it comes to Photoshop, let's see. Here we go. They're smart about their branding. Now, one of the things they do right is they're using a very easy to read, strong font in a large enough size that we're on a mobile device, we can at a glance read what's going on. So that becomes really important. And in their case, they're also not abusing all the text being in caps. So if we go, YouTubers are, and then we go, okay, this would be something that might be similar in copy to what Diary of a CEO does with inflammatory statement. In terms of an inflammatory statement. Now, I'm going to show you a trick with this. Diary of a CEO has the strategy of using an inflammatory statement with red text behind white text on a black background. And I'm using that inflammatory statement method to create visual impact right now. And one of the other thing is they also use very specific text blocking to some degree in their approach. I'm doing an inverted version of it where instead of having it on the left-hand side, I'm going to put it on the right-hand side, but I'm already doing something very similar. Okay. And you can kind of see it here. Now, what am I going to do to recreate the Diary of a CEO branding? I'm going to make sure I make a square that has no stroke around it and a red background fill. And it's mostly going to, I don't want it to be a rounded rectangle. So I'm going to also, in my settings here in Photoshop, eliminate the rounded corners. So that's going to be 0. Let's see. Yep. So it's just going to be a hard square, or sorry, hard rectangle, I should say. It's going to be a hard rectangle that goes behind my text. And it's going to be very much tight. In my case, I'm going to not have it too tight, but it's going to be pretty close. And then in terms of visual impact, that's a very strong thumbnail and text lockup. And what I did with that is I used certain shortcuts and tools in Photoshop to accomplish this. I can talk to you and tell you a little bit about what those are. But in terms of the layout, this has a high level of visual impact right then and there. So this becomes a really strong visual statement that grabs your attention. And there's actually contrast in the thing that I'm saying and the thing I'm portraying, which can be intriguing. So this is then a visual and psychological trick to intrigue the viewer into the statement around the video. So again, this can be very powerful and this can be very compelling. And this is based on the branding style of Diary of the CEO. Now, if I didn't want to directly rip off Diary of the CEO and then also just have this be plain and flat, which is it is a strategy in terms of a thumbnail design, I can take this a little further and make it my own. I can use the brush tool, and I'm going to go down to something like initially maybe 30 opacity with the brush tool. I'm going to show you a trick. So I'm also using shortcut I. I'm going to sample this red here. I like this. And then I'm going to create a blank layer behind the model layer, which is me here. I'm the model for this. And I'm going to use this red with the opacity. I'm going to make sure my hardness is down to 0. So actually, I'm going to erase this real quick, and then I'm going to start over. So I'm going to use the red. Maybe let's go to 40%. And I'm using a soft brush to create this red behind me that kind of just creates this more moody vibe. I'm going to use 10% now and just kind of bring it out a little bit. And so if I want to, like, you know, just kind of like put a little bit more in there, I can create another layer above me with some black and start to fade a little bit of that too, as if there's like a little bit of a shadow or a spotlight or something like that in a certain area. So I can kind of create this more dramatic effect. And so look at the dramatic effect that happens when I do that. So look, this is it without it, and this is it with it. And I would say that this is much more dramatic. I would say that this is much more eye-catching and much more dramatic overall, and that it sets a tone that feels more cinematic, but it also feels like the vibe is a little bit more sinister. Like that's something that gets implied there. So that's one element, one thing we can do. If we want to take this a little further, we can create a type of layer that's called an overlay layer. And then we can use a white brush with an overlay layer, make that maybe 20%, shrink that down. And then we can just kind of brighten me up in this area to create some more dramatic lighting. And then we can flip over shortcut X to black. And maybe I'm a little darker over here, but maybe not too much, because we don't want to make it impossible to see me. But we're kind of painting with light here and controlling our lighting on this overlay layer. So we want to say that this is overlay. We have this at 100%. So this is a technique that a lot of content creators use. And so that's pretty dope. Now, if we want to clean up some of the artifacts that didn't get taken out when we did our mask to remove the background, we just go to 100% black. We shrink up our brush a little bit. We click on this mask layer here, and then we just would paint out these areas by hand. This is easier if you have a graphics tablet. And so when you don't have a perfectly clean selection, you do that. Sometimes we don't want the brush to be 100% soft for that. We might move it to something like 70 or 80 so that we have a little bit of a harder edge to that brush. And we just clean up some of these artifacts just ever so slightly, ever so slowly, hyper zoomed in so that that masking is a little cleaner. We zoom in more with our brush. Again, this is much easier with if you have a graphics tablet, if you have a pen like a Wacom tablet or something like that. And you just clean up some of these edges here where it did not perfectly remove us from the background. Again, it's subtle, it's small. You may not think it matters, but just a little bit of cleanup work goes a long way. And then you can see it now. You can really see the difference that that made. Just doing a little bit of cleanup work, just a little bit of edge work there. Now, again, you can be more granular. You can do things like use the pen tool in Photoshop. Some people want to do that. Some people want to use that. Like me, I'm just going to eyeball it. I'm kind of old school like that. So again, this just shows you a way we can create a fairly dynamic thumbnail really quickly. The key to this that makes this work is having photos of yourself and poses that you can use and cut yourself out and remove yourself from the background. For a lot of you, the photography aspect of this is really important. In fact, to recreate the big YouTubers' thumbnails, the big key to it is photography. The big key to the big YouTubers' thumbnails is that they all do staged photography for their YouTube videos. That's what Eric does. That's what Mr. Beast does. That's what Ryan Tranhan does. So it's their poses. It's their poses. And the thing is, you can kind of see this and get a sense of this in my analytics thumbnails where I cut myself out from the background, where I'm holding the data. And this data that I'm holding, I photoshopped in that data. It's really just a blank white board that I have with a photo in my basement, and then I'm superimposing the data charts. These data charts are all from my YouTube analytics stuff, superimposed in Photoshop with just a white board. I could even have handwritten text on here to make the Instagram meme if I wanted to. So that's how this is done. That's because I'm doing photo shoots to pose for my thumbnails. And that's what all the big YouTubers are doing, is they are doing staged poses, interacting with the imagined thing in their backgrounds for their thumbnails. So that's how this is accomplished. So let's go ahead and take some questions from the chat. And then also I might recreate, some thumbnails. So let's go ahead and go to some of what you guys are saying in the chat. Seaside Adventures with Mommy and Me says, this is a lot of work. I'm overwhelmed already. Yikes. I'm still in the process of learning Canva. Yeah, it can be. It can be. Brandon's Recovery says, what's GIMP? GIMP is a free open source Photoshop knockoff. It can be really difficult to use, but it is still around. It is still around. June to Rio says, is it better to be consistent with color over all your videos or variety based on topic? Topic always comes first. Topic always comes first when it comes to the videos. You could try to keep some branding in place. Yes, we are using Photoshop for this. I am always Photoshop because it is the most powerful tool you can use. It is what the biggest YouTubers use. Most big YouTubers with 1 million subscribers, they're using Photoshop. 100,000 subscribers, they're using Photoshop. Sophie McDonald says, there is one problem with Diary of CEO identity design. It's too easy to replicate and is already being replicated. What would you suggest to create contrast against your competition? Well, actually, that's where I came in and I showed you, okay, if I was going to somewhat take their idea, here's how I improve upon that idea, add my own elements. And in my case, that was how I went in and I decided to work with dramatic lighting and to work with background lighting and then to create this sinister kind of overtone. And the thing is, you can tell that that's more on brand for me because you guys have seen me do negative framed thumbnails with a similar strategy to this. And so me using that concept of negative thumbnails, has worked in the past. And so you can see how that has been part of my strategy and how it's different. And I was doing that before Diary CEO was ever doing videos, by the way. This strategy and what they're doing has been used in negative ad campaigns as far back as the 1990s. So Diary CEO wasn't the first person to come out with this strategy, even use the fonts and the blocking and the layout and the quotes, the dark background, contrast lighting, all of that. That actually goes back to negative ad campaigns from the early 1990s. It's an attack ad strategy that was used in billboards and politics. And Diary of the CEO basically replicated that or was inspired by that. The font that I'm using is Futura Bold, but there are other great fonts that work with this. Some of the best fonts on YouTube are actually Inter. Inter can be a great font. Look at how strong Inter is. This is actually really good. More of you should be using Futura Bold, Inter. Oswald can be very good. Oswald Bold can be very good. I'm not going to use me. I'm going to use semi-bold here. So Oswald can be good. You can see that. Also, Helvetica obviously is strong. So you can use Helvetica Black and Helvetica Bold. Very powerful. You can use a combination of this is Helvetica Black, and then you could also use a Helvetica Bold, or you could use something else with it. You could use Bebas New Bold. Bebas New Bold can be strong, but you'll want to definitely adjust the kerning with that, which is the space between letters. You'll want to do that. So that could be an option for you. But I think that Futura Bold is one of the best YouTube fonts that there is. I would say that Futura Bold, Poppins, Inter, Oswald, Roberto, and those are all probably free fonts if I remember correctly. Those are some of the best, some of the absolute best that you could pick. Do I have gaming thumbnail ideas? I do. I work with a lot of Clash of Clans creators. Let me see if I have anything I can open. Let's see. Trying to see if I have something I can open that is more gaming inspired that can help some of you gamers. Because I've worked with a lot of Clash of Clans creators in the past, and other Supercell mobile gaming creators. So Clash of Clans, Clash Royale, Clash Mini, things like that. And so I'm going to look and see if there's something that I've created in the past that I can open up here that I happen to have in a saved Photoshop file that could inspire any of you. It's just a matter of whether I saved it or not. I may or may not have it on this machine. I might have it on another machine. Let's see. This one's not a gaming inspired one, but this one is definitely a tech. While I'm looking for a gaming one, just to give you guys a change of pace, this is a potential tech video for a desk tour. And the thing is, I can make this really interesting, even with just a color blocking change in the text. So let's see, with a color blocking change in the text, that immediately pops a lot more. And the thing is, I have some elements here, and you could argue that this is cluttered, but you could also argue that this helps create social proof of saying if this is a $15 video editing desk, having the price points for each of the items just kind of sells the idea. So the thing is, we could either rely on the numbers to do it itself, and just the desk itself and say, okay, wow, that's kind of dope, and we got the lighting, we got all the things. Or, I would probably A/B test it and see if having dollar signs for each of the items that kind of says, okay, I see how that's $15,000 now. We would see if that appealed more. So these are things we could do. And this was a lot of work because, as you can see here, the amount of layers in that layers folder to do the rounded rectangles and the dollar amounts was pretty significant. Here's a trick. If we also wanted to create a little bit more depth with this, we can actually apply a drop shadow to everything in that folder. And then all of a sudden, we literally have a drop shadow that we've created for everything on that folder. And I can also add a double drop shadow to make it more obvious or more pronounced. So the thing is, when you create a grouped layers folder in Photoshop, you can actually apply style effects to everything on that group's folder layer. So that's pretty cool. So that gives us those effects, and we can toggle those effects on or off or adjust them as we choose, but they're there. So we have that. And then obviously if we make this folder layer invisible, everything goes away. So, that's just a different type of thumbnail design for you. It's not a gaming thumbnail. I'm still looking for something like that for you. Let me see if... Let me search my Mac and see if I have any of these gaming thumbnails. But to be honest with you, gaming thumbnails are not really that complicated. You literally, if I was going to show you a really good example, of a gaming thumbnail and explain a gaming thumbnail, Let me go to who do I want? Whose channel do I want? Whose channel do I want? Let me see. You can go to actually, yeah, there's a channel I can share with you that would work. Let me share this small creator that I think does great thumbnails. Because like a lot of times we just keep sharing big creators, and that's not always particularly helpful because big creators aren't really relatable. So I think that Willie, he is a Clash player. He plays Clash of Clans. I think that Willie's thumbnails are actually really good. Some of them are simple, but they're really good. Now, if we go to like some of his most popular videos, again, he's a small content creator, he's a small YouTuber, but look at his thumbnails. So in terms of gaming thumbnails, I think this can be really good. My thought is that like a character recognizable to the game is usually one of the best things to put in a thumbnail. So that's an example here with Willie. Who else can I use? Nate does a really good job. Nate Clash Royale, he does a good job. He's under 100,000 subs. But if you're looking for inspiration for gaming thumbnails, this is what you'd want to look at, is stuff like this. And so I feel like he does really well. You can see what's been working for him in the game. And the thing is, it just makes it obvious what game you're playing. It's using a familiar character from the game. It's easy to understand what's going on here, like at a glance. So like for number one, road to number one, the social proof is there in the graphic right then and there. It is visually interesting. It is easy to understand what's going on here. And so easy peasy, ladder push. Okay, there's the graphic. There's our social proof right there. So using social proof in thumbnails for gaming, when you want to do gaming, use social proof in terms of things like ranking, ladders, high score, some in-game award or trophy. You want to utilize that. The characters from the game or the game's logo can be social proof itself. Another example of this is Composure, who is a Brawl Stars player. So Composure is really good. Look at his thumbnails. Very strong there. 37,000 subscribers. So again, not a huge content creator, but doing great work, getting great views. I've worked with Composure before. And so this would be an example for those of you in gaming of, what would look good. And the thing is, it's really about understanding the culture of the game, understanding the aesthetics, understanding the lore, the characters that everyone recognizes, what the meta of your game is. So for gaming, that's most of what I would tell you there. I don't want to harp on this too much in terms of gaming. Speak Spanish Now says, so the idea of using Speak Spanish Now says, so the idea is using 3 to 4 word max is not necessarily a real thing accordingly. It depends. There are exceptions versus the rule. 3 to 4 word max exists for a reason, because it comes from the old days of graphic design and billboards. The reality is that you only have a few, you have to be able to communicate your idea. Think about it like this. Someone's scrolling on YouTube. How many seconds? Let me know in the chat. All right, let's test the chat out on this. When you're scrolling in YouTube, how many seconds does it really take in terms of you paying attention to something? When you scroll and you're looking at thumbnails, how much time do you give attention? How much attention do you give to an individual thumbnail when you're scrolling through there? How long does a thumbnail have to grab your attentions? How many seconds? How many seconds does a thumbnail have to grab your attention? Let's post it up in the chat. How many seconds? I want your response. I'm going to chug some water, and then we'll see what you guys say, and then I'll tell you what the psychological answer is based on how this works, but also how billboards work. So common answer here, 3 seconds, 1 second, 1 second, 2 at the most, 1 second or less. People are saying, so the most common answers are topping out at 3 seconds. And the most common median answer is 1 to 3 seconds, which means that basically on average, it's 2 seconds on average. So it's basically on average 2 seconds. So it's between 1 and 3, averages out to 2. So how much attention you can give to something is very minimum when you're scrolling on YouTube. Same thing when you're passing a billboard on the highway. This is the internet superhighway, remember? So we use billboard psychology in the same way. So that's where 3 to 4 words maximum for us to be able to process that information as quickly as possible is true. There are exceptions to the rule, like Diary of the CEO, but they also have a lot of social proof in their favor. One, they only interview hyper relevant figures in entertainment, politics, media, top of their field, world renowned. 2, so they use social proof in that way. Interesting at a glance, they use inflammatory language in the title and thumbnail to be interesting at a glance. And then they're using bold and contrast with the black, white, and red because they're using visual acuity. They're using black, white, and red. That's the high contrast spectrum for visual acuity. So they're using that. So they're winning on that. And then in terms of being visually attractive, they're using black background, white text, red outline, and they're using usually good photography. So they're visually attractive. It's interesting at a glance because it's inflammatory. It's using bold and contrast. It's eye-catching. And they're using social proof, the social proof of the person they're interviewing that already has notoriety, infamy, controversy, or fame. And then the podcast itself also has notoriety, social proof, infamy, and fame. So the thing is, when you have enough of those things in combination, you can be an exception to some rules. But you have to remember that where it's an exception, it is following the majority of the rules, and it's only leaning on breaking one rule while following every other rule. That's what's happening here. So the thing is, if you're following 99% of the rules, the problem is people hyperfixate on, oh, this person threw out this one rule, so they're not playing by the rules. They're playing by the other 99 or the other 95. And all anyone does is pay attention to the 1, 2, or 3 rules that someone's breaking while they're doing everything else by the book and using everything else to their advantage. So psychology. I'm going to tell you another hack about billboard psychology and thumbnails, by the way. I'm going to tell you another hack about billboard psychology and thumbnails. So when it comes to billboard psychology and thumbnails, why do we choose the colors that we choose? I want you guys, what colors are the signs when you guys are heading down the highway? Let me know in the chat. Let me know in the chat. I'm going to answer the question. I'm going to tell you what the question is. But what color are the signs on the highway? Does anyone remember? You got a couple of different road signs when you're driving down the highway at 60, 80 plus miles per hour. And they need to make sure that it's going to be hyper visible to you, even at night, even at night. So what do you see going down the highway? And it's even in the middle of the night and you can still see it. Okay. So we got a couple of answers in the chat. I'm going to give you a little bit more time to get your answers again in the chat. And then when I show you YouTube, this is going to blow your mind. Okay. So in the chat, a lot of you are saying black and white and red. You're talking green, yellow, white. Some of you are bringing up blue. You're bringing up primary colors, plus blue, green, yellow, red, so on and so forth. Okay, I'm going to tell you, and this is going to be very interesting for a lot of you. and then I'm gonna show you some YouTubers. I'm gonna show you some YouTubers, and this is gonna blow your mind. So one of the colors on the highway that you always see is going to be blue with white text for the rest stops, but also green on the highway, and you're always going to be seeing green on the highway. And it's green with white text. So you see blue with white text, green with white text. Your stop signs are red with white text. Your hazard signs are yellow with black text. So guess what? All of the everything you need to know in terms of visual acuity, visual contrast already exists in that. What is the main color associated with Eric? It's red. What is the color associated with Tyler Oliveira? It's blue. Okay, it's blue. And then what is the color? Why is Ryan's channel not coming up? The color, frankly, associated with Ryan Trahan often tends to be green. Dire CEO, it's black, red, and white. Why? We always see white on red for the stop signs. That's a signal: stop, pay attention, urgency, immediacy. So that's that. Red, yellow, it's caution. Who's a content creator? Actually, there's several, but you know, I can find you a content creator who, or rather content creators that take advantage of yellow and black. It's our friends Colin and Samir. Their branding, it's yellow and black. That is the slow down caution sign on the road. It's a yellow field with black icons or black text. That's the caution signs. So Dire CEO uses black and red. Colin and Samir use yellow and black. Ryan Trahan often uses green. Eric uses a lot of red, hell a lot of red associated with Eric. Tyler Oliveira uses blue. So the thing is, the four colors and the combinations that are used on the highway for us to immediately be able to see at night and moving fast and at a glance, we know the color combinations. So it's white background, sorry, blue background, white text, because that's your rest stops, highway signs, and your street signs. Green field, white text. Okay. And then your caution signs. Your caution signs are yellow with black text or black icons. And then your stop signs, red text, sorry, red background, white text, red background, white fonts. Boom. So the thing is, when you're going through that in America anyway, and they've done the research and everything like that, that's high contrast and visual acuity. By the way, they also did that for accessibility. Why? Because even if you're colorblind, you can differentiate the contrast between those colors. Even if you're colorblind, you can contrast and tell the difference between those colors when they're present, and you can still read that. So you're moving fast, and advice. You're moving fast and it's dark at night. So that means that has the highest probability of getting your attention. That's the highest probability of getting your attention. That's biology. That's visual acuity. That's how your eyes work. And that's about the contrast and tonal range. And so when you're scrolling through your phone, that's why that would work. So I'm teaching you some graphic design stuff here because that was my background. I was a graphic designer, and this is teaching you advanced thumbnail theory. And this is like a lot of times you might think, okay, does the YouTuber know that? But their thumbnail artist might be a classically trained graphic designer, or might just be doing basic pattern recognition, or might have figured this out by typing it into search or watching videos like mine. Graphic design theory, color theory. They may have watched a video from Christo on color theory. So the thumbnail artists that YouTubers hire, they know this. And to a degree, YouTubers can watch these patterns in television, movies, and films, and then be subconsciously influenced by it. And then those techniques just start showing up in their channel. But again, if you're moving fast, scrolling, like we said, you guys confirmed it yourself. You got 1 to 2 seconds. You confirmed it yourself. And all of you basically accurately remembered what colors those road signs are, and you all remember that, wow, when I'm flying down the road, I can immediately see that even in the dead of night. So of course you're going to be able to see it, and you can see it in broad daylight. Guess what? Those colors have the best chance of standing out in dark mode and light mode in YouTube the same way in real life. They stand out in the middle of the day and they stand out in the middle of the night. Boom. Is your mind blown right now with regard with how we handled color theory? Is your mind blown when it comes to how this works on YouTube? Nice, right? Isn't it interesting how we can use biology and psychology to win at YouTube when it comes to these things? So let's see here. What are you guys saying in the chat? So somebody's asking about YouTube channels that cover TV shows. The best example of a TV show channel is Charlie from Emergency Awesome. Charlie from Emergency Awesome is probably your best bet when it comes to, okay, what do you do about thumbnails for a TV show? But even with that, it's actually not complicated. I'm actually surprised that I have to spell this out for people because this one's actually pretty easy and pretty obvious at a glance. And it's kind of shocking to me that I have to break this one down, but I will. The thing with TV and movie show thumbnails is, it's pretty useless most of the time to put yourself in the thumbnail if you're covering a TV show. The people are most interested in the TV show and the thing itself. So often having in some way the show logo or something to do with that can be a thing. But the thing is, you don't have to necessarily take the same exact approach that Charlie is. It's just the most simple one. Charlie's approach is the most simple one, and he is one of the bigger channels that does this, but you don't necessarily have to use his approach. A more novel approach could be Star Wars theory. I enjoy his content a lot, and one of the things that Star Wars theory does really well is I do feel like he gets a little bit creative with some of his thumbnails, and he makes excellent choices, I think, in terms of some of the characters, and then also some of the creativity with adding some Photoshop effects to some of the thumbnails, contrasting multiple characters, taking interesting scenes, things like that. So I do feel that, and again, sometimes he does new stuff, and that's a different thumbnail style, but some of the compare and contrast stuff, that can be interesting. But one of the most important things if you're going to do TV and movie show reviews is to highlight and use characters that are immediately recognizable to the audience at a glance. And remember, the most interesting thing to the viewer is the TV show, not you. So just kind of keep that in mind. And again, I think Star Wars theory is a good example because, again, these aren't the most crazy, wild, out-of-pocket, hard-to-make thumbnails in the world, and they still get views. If I scroll through his most popular videos of all time, these thumbnails are not impossible for anyone to make. These thumbnails are relatively straightforward and simple as long as you can find the images for them. And again, millions of views. And not all of them are super old. Some of them are more recent from like 2 years ago or whatever. But these are not the most complicated thumbnails in the world for anybody to make. And yet, thanks, bro. And yet, they are incredibly effective. So this is just another example for you. And again, a lot of it really comes down to when you're not making original content and you can't do the poses for the video yourself, the main thing would be to use something that's recognizable to the audience and that they're already a fan of. And remember to kind of take yourself out of the equation. It's not really about you if you're covering a franchise. If you're covering a franchise, it's not about you. Another really good channel, if you're one of these people who does entertainment content about franchises, is Stupendous Wave. Stupendous Wave. Here we go. So Stupendous Wave is another Star Wars creator. And again, I'm aware of this because, again, I'm a big Star Wars nerd. I'm a big Star Wars fan. So again, good layout, good design for thumbnails. I like the contrast. Again, it's about being effective. A lot of these are not necessarily out of pocket or wild. If I look at the most popular ones, again, these aren't necessarily crazy thumbnails to make. These aren't hard to duplicate thumbnails, if we're being honest, yet they're super effective. One could argue that also title, of course, plays a role in the combination. But again, thumbnails get our attention. Thumbnails are to get our attention. It's just like your clothing. Clothing is to get attention, right? You wear something, you get attention. People notice you. They notice the fabric, the cut, the fit, all those things, what have you, the colors. All right, that's the same thing with your thumbnail. Then the title is just like your opening sentence, and that's where you can screw it up. So no matter how attractive you are, you can open your mouth and screw it all up. Your thumbnail's the same. You have a great thumbnail, get attention, and lose everything in the title. They have to work together. They have to work in combination. So that is just something important. And so, yeah, here's someone, that nerd Dylan is colorblind and says, yes, Roberto can confirm as colorblind person. It's why mixing red and green doesn't work so well. Exactly. So using the color combinations that we talked about and the visual acuity and contrast, it all is about what we can immediately notice. And again, if it's the color contrast is so important that in using those combinations, that even if a colorblind person can see it, then you know it has the right visual contrast. Orlando Scott says, can you redo your thumbnails after you've launched? Absolutely. And I've done that. Other people have done that. We A/B test thumbnails because sometimes, you know, you're putting a thumbnail together in the middle of the night, you're launching a video, and then you go, oh, wait, you know what? I didn't do this, or I could do better. You can replace the thumbnail. It could turn a video around. Absolutely. Coastal Diva says, those just aren't very coastal colors for me to use. I do use them, but it goes against what I really like. And yeah, sometimes it works great, and sometimes it didn't make a difference. What I believe is a lot of creators do this whole do what you like, stick to your guns thing and everything like that. I think it's often terrible advice for creators. As someone who like leans much more to the business side of being a content creator, I'm going to tell you do what works. I'm going to tell you do what you works, because the thing is, I think that even if I'm not telling you to do something you hate or something you think is unethical, but I do think if you do something effective and it works and you get the views, subscribers, or money that you want, the fact that, oh, I didn't get to use my favorite color, or, oh, I had to take my face out of the thumbnail to get it. If you get the outcome you want, you're not going to be that sad about it. If you're like, oh, I didn't get to make the thumbnail the way I wanted, but you got 1 million views, you're not going to be sad. You're going to say, screw it. I'll give the people what they want. You will not be sad. You will not be sad. Oh, I didn't get to use my favorite color, but I got 100,000 more views. You will not be sad. Trust me. Success cures a lot of things. And success is also the cure for all of your hangups artistically. When you start realizing things like, wow, I stopped doing all that over-the-top editing and my video did just as well, or it did 5 times better. You go, okay, I'm going to kill my darlings. I'm not going to do the thing that I'm like artistically in love with if the thing is I'm getting 5 times, 10 times better results. And sometimes you have to learn to live with what's effective. But the thing is, when you start getting results you want, you're not sad about how you got it a lot of the time. Astatine says, your thumbnails are very masculine. I mean, well, I'm a guy, so yeah, my thumbnails are going to be masculine. Can you show some more feminine thumbnail styles? I guess. I mean, I just have to pull up a female content creator to do that. So I guess I would use Lavender. I would just use Lavender as an example. If you are looking for the female thumbnail aesthetic, of course, my examples are going to be masculine because I'm masculine. So here's the female thumbnail aesthetic of one of my favorite creators, which is Lavender. And what I would say is she uses light and airy colors a lot. You still can understand her stuff at a glance, which is really important. She's a very established creator, very popular, 2.29 million subscribers. She makes great aesthetic content. I say the thing that works for her is our thumbnails have a very realistic vibe, very airy vibe. They do have that female aesthetic. And I would say that this is something, if you were looking for something you can make in Canva, her thumbnails are very easy to make in Canva. However, you may have noticed something. They rely on good photography, good lighting. What is Lavender doing? She's doing a really good photography aesthetic. She has depth of field and a bokeh background. You're going to want to use a real camera to accomplish this. You need to use a real camera. And she is still using some very smart overall techniques when it comes to graphic design. Her text is very readable, even on a mobile device for the most part. There are times when it wouldn't be as readable. For example, in this Life is an Art, that doesn't stand out. There's not enough drop shadow. I would have put a drop shadow behind that, or at least an outline behind that, even though aesthetically it may not fit the vibe she was going for. It'd be easier to read, especially if you're someone who's colorblind, or if for accessibility reasons, or if you have glasses, it would be easier to read. So that would be one criticism. It works for her though. It works for her. I just like to sometimes try to prioritize accessibility in some of those things and lean into that. But she does have an aesthetic that she's chosen. It is on brand for her. But I will say that a lot of these things, remember, the difference in views is not purely on the thumbnail. It is topic, title, thumbnail, and timing all working together to accomplish a view count. But the thumbnail immediately is the thing our eyes go to. Then we try to get validation and confirmation from things like the title, which informs the topic and the relevancy of the timing. So that becomes important. But if you were looking for an example of the female aesthetic, here it is. And this is one of what I would say is one of the best creators in the space, at least in my opinion. I think she does a lot right. But I would tell you that, remember, this relies heavily on good photography. And good photography is not a function of just good cameras. It's a function of good lighting. And that's a function also of things like depth, contrast, lighting, and also composition. Composition, choosing where you're going to be in frame, choosing how tight something is, zoomed out shot, wide shot, or head and shoulders, or waist and shoulders, medium shot, or head and shoulders, what you'd call a close-up or tight shot. So it's like, are you tight, medium, or wide? Tight is basically what I have right here in frame. This is tight. This is what you call a close-up, okay? Further back, this is getting close to what is a medium. And if I was all the way back, that'd be a wide, okay? So just kind of consider that. The best YouTube thumbnails tend to be, in most cases, not all, but in most cases, tend to be medium shots. Medium shots. So what are medium shots? Usually from top of head to roughly about waist, or where the elbows hit, So you can look at mine and Ali Abdal's videos for that to a degree. Medium shots could also be Mr. Beast when it's not full shotty body shot, where it's like at the waist for him. So that can be very important. And yes, Tierman Guitars is right. There's a lot you can do just with your camera lenses. Absolutely. My protein shake. It's all over my face here. Excuse me a second. Oh, but that's so good. I can feel the protein surging through my body. So yeah, Premier Gal, Kelsey from Premier Gal is another great reference in terms of female aesthetic. And she uses a strong photography aesthetic that has high contrast, sharpness, depth of field, bright colors. So I really enjoy her vibe. Again, another popular content creator, you know, and I've had the pleasure of meeting her. She's very cool in real life. But again, this also is a exercise in brand consistency and aesthetic in terms of her colors and themes. So very cool. And you can see how she uses her elements. I love this here because this is a great example. By using the Premiere Pro icon in this, that's a level of social proof to Adobe Premiere users. Same thing with using the Adobe Premiere interface and version 24 for 2024. Those things, the Premiere Pro and After Effects icons, those are social proof to Adobe users. They're also eye-catching elements at the same time as well. And I love what she does in a lot of these because these are interesting at a glance. And then because of the contrast, the color, the sharpness, they are visually attractive immediately as well. So I do love these. And I love the storytelling that happens in her thumbnails. So again, leveraging social proof, accomplishing visually attractive and then interesting at a glance in terms of your storytelling approach, all can be seen here. And I really do enjoy her thumbnails. I also enjoy some of the playfulness of her thumbnails. So again, consider that vibe and tone as well in the vibes framework. Consider tonality. Consider not just visual tonality, but also communication style. Are your thumbnails serious? Are they stoic? Are they playful? Is it commentary? Is it angry? Is it always excited, always positive? What tone are you trying to convey in your thumbnails? Are you doing that overall for the channel, or is it topic to topic, video to video? So again, these are things to consider, and these are great examples of thumbnails. So when it comes to the apps and programs for thumbnails, the best one for the most versatile options possible is Photoshop, which is used by all the big creators. However, if you are focusing on good photography and you need to just be simple, you can get away with just using Canva like Lavender does. But if you want to be able to make the kind of things that myself and Kelsey and some of the other creators, the biggest creators, Mr. Beast, Eric, and them make, it is going to be Photoshop. Now, again, if you feel like you're missing the mark on it, it just means that maybe what you need to do is go through and learn more of the tools and what they're capable of. But it also can mean you need to learn things like photography. Your thumbnails, a lot of times, are only as good as your assets. So what are you doing in terms of photography? Remember, with my thumbnails, what I do, I focused a lot on the poses. Same thing with Chelsea. We have endless files of ourselves with different poses and photo shoots so that we can make our thumbnails possible and so we can interact with elements in our thumbnails. Same thing for the biggest creators. The biggest creators you see have these poses that are interactive with the contrived thing that they did in Photoshop. So that becomes really important. It becomes incredibly important. So if you feel like your thumbnails might be, quote unquote, missing the mark, consider that some of it is, well, what assets do you have to work with? Do you have good photos to work with? Yes or no? Do you understand what makes a good photo? Do you have the resources to make a good photo? Do you have the understanding of layout, composition, lighting, contrast, posing, etiquette? Do you have those things to make a good photo? Do you have someone to help you take a photo if you need to be the person in the photo doing the thing? Do you have that? Do you have access to stock photography that'd be really good, like Adobe stock? Or are you going to use generative AI for that? And if so, is it going to be good or is it going to be crappy? Or are you going to combine elements where some elements are real and then some AI, those real elements are then fixed or exaggerated by the AI tool? So on and so forth. What if, like, do you understand typography and what good fonts are, like we talked about, and why we use sans serif fonts? Remember, all those fonts driving down the hallway, they're all sans serif fonts. They don't have the ligatures at the end. They don't have those curvatures at the end. They're not cursive, pretty handwriting, which I know a lot of you like to do. No, they're just hard, bold, sharp text, straight lines, easy to read, sans serif. So sans serif fonts. So again, a lot of YouTube thumbnails come down to, do you have a good photo? You could do a Peter McKinnon or a Casey Neistat and just have a really interesting photo. But are you good at photography? Are you good at storytelling? Are you good at posing? Are you in an interesting place? Do you have interesting things to photograph? Yes or no? Because you can get clicks and views purely off photography. If you're not good at graphic design, get good at photography and good at storytelling and good at what would get clicks on or likes on Instagram. What would be a good magazine cover? What would be a good magazine spread? What would be a good billboard that's just a visual only billboard? What would work for that? What would be a good movie poster? That plays a difference. With purely just photography and staging, you could literally make your entire thumbnail purely with photography. If you're willing to do the background design and setup, or set up the stage the photo and do a high key photo shoot, you could do that. Some YouTubers do. But if that's not practical for what the story of the video is, then it won't work. A lot of you just need to put more thought into the idea, and you should be crafting the thumbnail before the video even, but that's a lot for some of you. And really what it comes down to in a lot of cases is it's a skill issue. As much as that might hurt to say or to hear, it's often a skill issue when it comes to thumbnails. Because like I said, be a master photographer or be a master layout artist or be at least a little good at all the things, because it would matter. And you can see the different types of thumbnails that people can do that would matter. Now, if you look into the history of my channel, even with the history of my channel, there are videos that are tech videos that were purely photography based even. Let me see if I can pull some of that up. There were some thumbnails back in the day that I did purely photography, no design required whatsoever, all photography. And they got like 100,000 views, even when I was smaller. It really depends on what people care about. Timing plays a role in all of this too, obviously. I mean, I would tell you that the timing and topic for a video kind of decide more of its destiny than most things. I'll give you a primary example of this. So back in the old days, when I did a lot more tech content, I got early access to the Microsoft Surface Studio because I was at Adobe Max as a speaker. The fact that I could show that this product exists and that I had my hands on it and access to it in the real world, and other people have the product in the background, and that when you go into the video, it's not clickbait, that made a difference. And because it was me and Justine who had the earliest access, because she got it shipped before everybody, and I happened to be at the event, and we got it out before other people besides news outlets, I had access to the product early. So being physically hands-on, that gave me a timing advantage. But I also was able to make a non-clickbait thumbnail because, oh, he has the product. Here's another video that's purely photography based. It's my HP Pavilion video. Now, here's the thing. I have another laptop advice video to see. Like, by the way, everyone thinks I grew my channel off YouTube advice. I grew it off tech and tutorials before any of you came to me for YouTube advice and was getting hundreds of thousands of views on some of these videos. So a simple thing here with the photography, and this is when I was a small creator, and this was when I was broke as hell. This is a $600 laptop in this advice video. So advice for buying video editing laptops. So boom, I have a laptop in my hand and laptop buying advice. Couldn't be simpler. 349,000 views, 300K views. HP Pavilion, 2-in-1 laptop, top 5 features. What I do, purely photography thumbnail, but how'd I stage it? I put Darth Vader as the desktop background, and I showed that it's a 2-in-1 flipped laptop. So there's a thing that I'm showing some social proof of. I have the product, it's in my office, and I'm using it with its 2-in-1 flip over capability thing, and boom. There's also something you immediately recognize. Darth Vader's iconic. So I used that all to my advantage. and that worked in terms of views. And so you can see other different thumbnail styles that you do things here, but I'm looking for some more of these photography driven ones. Here's something where I literally just used a photo of the inside of my PC build, 162,000 views, 162,000 views using just purely the photography of inside of my PC build, talking about the minimum requirements for video editing laptops and desktops. Purely photography driven. Let me see if I can find another close to. Here's a social proof video. Simple video, a year ago, green screen tutorial, as fast as possible, which is also the social proof of that is also the fact it's a 1 and 29-second video. So that the timestamp can be social proof too, by the way. And so, boom, step by step, and Premiere Pro logo in here. But this is also, again, an execution of good staging, because I photoshopped the ability to physically hold an object and I replaced that object with the Premiere Pro logo. Not an easy Photoshop trick to do, by the way, and I can kind of show you that. Same thing here. This one's me holding the YouTube logo. That's a Photoshop trick that I used. I'm holding a physical object. I replaced it and Photoshopped around my hands for it. And then I'm saying most profitable niches in YouTube. And then what am I, excuse me. And what am I doing? I'm also using the visual contrast of red and blue, opposite ends of the spectrum. And then what else am I doing? I'm effectively using green dollar signs against both of them, and it works. And then what is my thing? I'm wearing a non-color, black, and I'm in the center frame. That is effective graphic design. I don't even need text to sell that idea. I don't even need text to sell the idea. 100,000 views. Okay. This one, I'm communicating the concept of time in terms of the 4,000 watch hours video. I'm communicating the concept of time, and I'm making explicit 4,000 hours watch time. I use a clock. I use the YouTube logo iconography. I use a thoughtful expression in pose, and I'm using a giant pencil as a prop. I'm doing a lot of things here, but a big focus on it is using every aspect of, I'm using typography, I'm using design elements, I'm using color contrast with red, white, and blue. I'm using a neutral color for me, gray, and I'm also interacting to a degree with the elements in there, foreground, background, middle ground. So there's depth, there's contrast, readability at a glance. You understand everything that's going on in this video. And so it makes it very abundantly clear what is going on and what it's about. Boom. So that's just another example. And again, this is where photography can be very helpful. In a different video with regard to social proof, I talked about YouTube profitable niches. I used Graham Stephan. I used Mr. Beast. I used dollar signs. I used green. I used the YouTube logo. And I just have simple text, 2 words, YouTube money, 99,000 views. So, by the way, you may have noticed I'm no slouch at videos. It just, they're hit or miss. It's all topic based for me, but it's hit or miss. You may have noticed I am fully capable of getting 100,000 view videos. It's just about what you want to watch. It has nothing to do with what I want to make. It has everything to do with what you want to watch. And it doesn't matter how good or how simple my thumbnail is, the topic will decide whether you want to watch. So the topic and title will decide if you want to watch. The thumbnail is solely so I have a shot. It's to get my attention. It's to get your attention. It's to get you to stop the scroll and to read the title and then see if that topic is relevant to you right now. So topic and timing. The title is communicating the topic and the timing. The thumbnail is reinforcing that, but it's also getting your attention. All of those things have to work at the same time. And I can accomplish this in a lot of different ways. Look at this one. This one is the Adobe InDesign tutorial. This is just typography, nothing more. And it just says what it is. Almost 500,000 views. Was it in a simpler time of YouTube? Yes. Do thumbnails like that still work today? I see them all the time. Some simple thumbnails still work today. So you can use, look what, this one's purely photography. All this one is literally my facial expression. And this is in 2007. It's not that long ago in the grand scheme of things. 200,000 views. Should you start a YouTube channel in 2007? Yes and no. 200,000 views. Purely photography, purely facial expression. Purely facial expression. The title did most of the work, but the simplicity of the thumbnail speaks to an earnestness and an authenticity. What's that like today? Why is that? Why do I say that that's still a relevant tactic today? Sam Sulek. Sam Sulek is doing this type of thumbnail today. Now, again, he doesn't look like me. He's, a genetic freak of nature with massive muscles and looks like, the Hulk in real life. So he's walking clickbait. But again, it's the same principle and tactic being used today effectively on YouTube. Look at this one. There's no Photoshop. This is just a photographic thumbnail. Stop trading time for money. $1,000 a week passive income. What I do, I literally have a piece of paper I ripped out of my sketchbook, handwritten. It speaks to this concept of an authentic, no BS thumbnail. This video almost has no editing in it either. It's just me talking to people, and that's only from 5 years ago. So again, in the grand scheme of things, I'm telling you, there's a variety. There's no one thumbnail style that works. And you can see that proof in the pudding, not only on my channel, but on all the channels we've covered. And that sometimes even a good thumbnail isn't enough if the video topic. We've seen great thumbnails. Here's another one that's just photography. 100,000 views. Complete guide to buying new laptops in 2016. Laptop buyer's guide. Social proof. At the time, this is a new laptop that was out. It was the Dell XPS 13, was a popular laptop at the time in 2016. Social proof is having that laptop. So again, these are things you can use and take advantage of. And there's a reason that I'm teaching you the framework that we use over in Awesome Creator Academy, the Vibes framework, because when you think about it, there are different ways to take advantage of it. There are different techniques to take advantage of it. There's different strategies, and most YouTubers have figured out the strategy that works best for them based on a combination of their skills, what's normal in their niche, what stands out in their niche, but a lot of it's their skills. Photographers use photography skills, or they hire people who have it. Graphic designers, a lot of YouTubers, they don't have any of these skills. You know what they're all doing? They're hiring thumbnail artists who do have the skills. And what they at least will do is they'll take a bunch of poses and do things for that person to work with. So that makes a huge difference. Huge difference. Astatine85 says, do the algos analyze color and layout for pushing videos? No, they more so analyze what a viewer responds to, and you as a viewer will see more of that based on it. However, they can scan text and understand text and language in a thumbnail using Google Cloud Vision AI. My friend Daryl Eves talks about that. We talked about it when we talked about localization and different languages, and why I'm going to localize my thumbnails for the Roberto and Espanol channel to use Spanish text, because it can recognize the difference between English and Spanish text based on whether you're an English or Spanish speaker, and then recommend videos to you and thumbnails to you based on whether you're speaking Spanish, Hindi, whatever. So you want to use the localized text. It's also the reason that I started at a certain point. Remember, I've been a text-heavy thumbnail guy. You think it's an accident that I moved to thumbnails that you can understand without reading text? Because it's more universal. And as we move to channels, they're going to be multilingual, universal thumbnails. When you start using multi-language AI dubbing and having your channel in multiple languages, thumbnails that can be understood at a glance in every language is going to become important. So that's going to be incredibly powerful. So that's going to be incredibly powerful for the future, because the future is multilingual channels. In the chat, for those of you who are live, I want you to answer a simple question for me. What skill do you think you need to improve the most? Graphic design or photography? Of the two base skills for making YouTube thumbnails, is it photography and posing, or is it graphic design? Which one do you need to improve the most? Is it your photography or is it your graphic design? Let me know in the chat. In fact, let me see if there's a way to run a poll right now live. Let me see if there's an easy way for me to run a poll on the current video while we're at it. Because I think that'd be interesting. If we can pull that off, that'd be great. That'd be great. Let's see. Because if I can run a poll, that'd be dope. Let's see. I know there's a way to do it. It's just a pain sometimes to set up the, what do you call it? The live, the backstage for when you're doing your live streams. Because I like to manage everything from Streamyard, but on the YouTube end of managing everything else for your live streams, yeah, they have an annoying way for you to get to that. I wish they'd make it more convenient. I might have to send them my thoughts on the UI UX design for that, because I do think it could be better. I mean, yeah, YouTube's great. Don't get me wrong, but there are aspects and things that can be done better that would be massively helpful. So let's see. Start a poll. Great. So let me see. Photography, graphic design. We can run a poll. Yeah. Which skill? Hang on. Which skill do you need to work on? And we'll go to start poll. There you go. So now you guys can vote on the poll. So I posted that. Wow, right now graphic design is in the lead. I'm shocked. I'm shocked that more of you, again, there's nothing wrong. There's not a right or wrong answer to this, by the way. There's not a right or wrong answer to this. But I am shocked that more of you feel that you need to work on graphic design than you do photography. Because looking at the most common type of popular YouTube videos and their thumbnails, they're mostly, at this point, photography driven. If you look at Mr. Beast, Eric, Ryan Trahan, you look at any of the biggest YouTubers, their thumbnails are photography based. And whenever I ask all of you, it feels like everyone wants to try to duplicate their thumbnails more than anyone else. But it's fine to not want to do that. It's actually really great if you don't want to necessarily duplicate the big three. But in general now, most YouTubers' thumbnails are photography based, unless they're doing like entertainment content, unless they're doing gaming, this and that. And even then, there's some elements of that in there sometimes. So there is that. So it just depends on what you're making as to which skill is more favorable to you, to be honest. So I could totally get that, and it would make sense. It just depends on what you're making and who your audience is as to what skill you need the most of. I would argue nowadays, though, in general, that it's obviously the best thing is to have both skills and to utilize both skills. But I would argue that nowadays, with the trend toward doing more IRL content, that instead of bedroom YouTuber content, I would say that the trend toward IRL content makes learning photography more important than it's ever been. For a cooking channel, Divine Chef, it would absolutely be photography. If you're doing anything food related, like at all, then you definitely want to be a master of photography. So if we look at my friend Kayla's channel, her thumbnails are gorgeous. Now, it doesn't necessarily always translate to views, but yeah, photography for a food channel could definitely be much, much more important. So it really just depends. Let's look at our most popular stuff, because that might be more reflective of what you guys are aiming for. So this DIY dog cupcakes is a perfect example of why photography for a food channel actually matters. So if you're doing a cooking or food related or baking channel, yeah, photography. All about that photography. You also can get an idea here of what looks good. And you kind of want to like think with food channels, you want to think Instagram aesthetic, to be honest. So really aesthetic stuff ends up becoming really important. And again, I like to showcase what channels under 100,000 are doing good, because I do think that only covering the largest creators and what people with millions of subs and million views, I don't know that it's that helpful compared to being able to see people that are much more comparable to what seems attainable to you, or even people you might relate to more. Yeah. If you're doing, Cadu Ribeiro says, well, Roberto, I think that makes sense for when they're doing their image and tangible things on videos. Agreed. For app tutorial, for example, graphic design composition makes more sense, I guess. No, you're absolutely right. If you're doing IRL things, or you're doing product-based things, or you're doing food-based things, photography. If you're doing television shows, movie reviews, gaming, app tutorials, it absolutely leans much more toward graphic design being an important skill set. What could be interesting is to get a sense of which types of content more of you are doing. So in terms of the poll, let's see what the results are so far. Let's see what the poll results are. Wish there was an easy way on Streamyard to show the poll results. But currently, if I end the poll now, it looks like for the poll that 31% of you, with 50 votes in, 31% of you said photography, 68% of you said graphic design. So I'd imagine that means that 7 out of 10 of you are doing things that are not IRL content, and you're doing some form of gaming, TV, television show reviews, or you're doing app reviews and tutorials and things like that. So you're not doing IRL content. So it's interesting that in this audience, maybe 7 out of 10 of you are not doing IRL content at all. Therefore, you're leaning more design than photography. That's interesting. Always good to know these things. Always good to know these things. What about a car painting channel? It'd be photography. If you're doing car painting, it'd obviously be photography. Sports channels? It depends. If you're doing sports, if you're doing sports, you know, or you're doing trick shotting, you're doing dude perfect stuff, you're doing athletics, you're doing boxing, it's clearly going to be photography. If it is you're covering UFC, you're covering the NFL, you're covering the NBA, then you need to understand graphic design, but you also need to understand what sourcing good photography for that thing looks like. So that would matter. Clearly. Graphic design, I think it's reductive to say that graphic design is learning how to find cool pics and put text on images. Graphic design is more than that. It's layout, it's composition, it's knowing what fonts are good fonts, it's knowing what color combinations do work together and knowing color theory. It is knowing typography, learning tracking, learning kerning, which is basically letter spacing and line spacing. So knowing letter spacing and line spacing, knowing what fonts to pick, knowing what font combinations to pick, knowing why we don't use more than 2 fonts usually, knowing which fonts are effective for your goal, knowing what colors are effective for your goal, knowing what readability looks like, what we talked about with color contrast, knowing tonal range, knowing depth of field. Graphic design is more than knowing how to put together a combination of good images and good text. That's the most reductive and simplistic version of trying. I know you're not trying to be insulting. I'm just saying that graphic design is much more complicated than anyone gives it credit for. It's why no one understood it when I did it back in the 2000s. No one understood how important it is, but it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And that's why Steve Jobs was obsessed with it, with Apple's branding and packaging. Steve Jobs was obsessed when it comes to that. Let me see. What's a sports channel? Oh, you know what? Okay. Actually, you said, can you give an example of sourcing photography for sports content? Okay. Bunnymon. Because someone asked, AJ asked, can you give an example when you say sourcing photography for covering sports? Certainly. So we have a content creator, Bunnymon. She covers the WWE. She covers wrestling. So when it comes to her content, and look at this. So sourcing the right photography, she does reaction content to the WWE. She's a big WWE fan. So, you know, shout out to her. Sourcing the right photos and images for her reaction content is very important. So let's see what the most popular ones were, for example. Looks like she used to react to a lot of other things before she focused on WWE, but here is an example for the WWE for wrestling. So she was covering best entrances. So that was a thing, even in general for reaction content. I'm going to see if we can get to more of her higher view wrestling reactions. WWE Stiff Fets Moments reaction. Okay, sourcing that photo, if you look to the far right there, sourcing that photo and realizing that's the right one to put a reaction face on, that was extremely practical, and that one was important. Let's see. Girl watches women wrestlers finishers 2022. All right, like picking that one, that was smart. So, I mean, that's just an example in terms of even with someone doing reaction channels to like doing a reaction channel that's focused around the WWE and picking the right images and the difference that it makes. The MC Punk video, like picking the right photo, 67,000 views, picking the right photos and things to use and graphic design for Roman Reigns. Okay, look at the amount of views. WWE speeches that make you cry. This was sourcing the right photography, but also having the right pose to interact with it. Girl watches WWE top emotional moments. Picking this one with the kid. This looks like a Make-A-Wish kid. So like, again, just picking and the right photos. Sourcing the right photos for your stuff, it actually matters. There's someone who does UFC reactions. Like, and again, it's going to matter in terms of being able to source the right images for the most views. Actually, even with let's see. Actually, I have another one. It's not even a dedicated reaction channel. Look at Dr. Mike. Dr. Mike reacts to painful WWE injuries. Look at that. That's a brilliant photo to pick in terms of, okay, that's the one that will get people's attention. So again, when it comes to sports, it comes down to more than just being able to, oh, text on photo, good. It's about also sourcing the right thing. Here's one from a channel called Mighty. He picked, a UFC submission hold, and he picked it from a particular moment in a fight, and then his reaction face to it is specific to the type of injury that's going to happen in this fight. So if you need literal examples when it comes to the sports side of sourcing photos, I mean, there you go. So I hope that answers your question, AJ. Hope that answers your question. Jacqueline, the reason Jacqueline Roberts says, I was going to ask about fonts because I noticed that most of the fonts are very simple. The reason most of the fonts are very simple is because it does make them easier to read. So let's see here. Let me see if I can kind of illustrate this point in Photoshop itself. So give me a moment here, because I'm going to illustrate for you why typography is simplistic and why we don't make it fancy. And I'm going to make it kind of easy to understand by just showing it on screen. So bear with me. Because if I just show it on screen, it'll make more sense. Okay. So let me just like erase this, or like, let me start a new text layer. Let me just start a new text layer. All right. So I'm going to make just a blank black screen, and I'm going to illustrate a point. So this is doing sample lorem ipsum text. Okay. All right. So let's go to fonts. You may notice that as I scroll through different fonts, this becomes more and less readable. Now, what I'm going to do, just to do something with letter spacing, just so that in general, this is easier for everyone to read in general and understand what I'm talking about. I'm just going to arbitrarily and randomly scroll through different fonts. This is Gil Sans. Okay, this is Grantha. This is Helvetica. This is Helvetica LT Pro. Standard. This is Helvetica New. Helvetica New LT Black. This is Herculum. This is Hofler. This is Hypatia. This is Impact. This is Inter. You may have noticed that this is Iwonen Old Style. You may have noticed that as we scroll through different fonts, that our capacity to read at a glance and the way that they look to us and the amount of visual impact they have just on a black screen, you can see that it makes a difference. This is Komu. This one's Komu. This is more of a techie font. So watch this. So if I say a phrase like the future, okay, watch what happens here. You want to know about why we use certain fonts versus others. what am I doing here? I'm using Option and I'm using the right bracket to create more letter spacing for this. What am I doing now? I'm holding Shift, Command, and the greater than sign, and then Option to make this 10, like, is it 10 points or is it 5 points? 5 points bigger every time I click on it. So, okay, so boom. So now I have the words, the future, okay? And that stands out, and that also feels futuristic because I chose this particular font called Kumu. But what if I use Enter? It's not quite the same, is it? Even if I extend this so it's not running together as much, it's just not quite the same, and it doesn't hit quite the same, okay? Let me make it easier for you to compare fonts. I'm going to use Option and the arrow key and Shift and drag and drag. I'm going to show you something. So if I go ahead and then I select for this Komu, you can see the big difference between Komu and Enter. And then let me take the italic off. So, okay, you see the difference. You can see the difference if I pick Futura. We'll use Futura bold here. Notice the difference in what's communicated with these 3 different choices in fonts. 3 different choices in fonts, 3 different impressions, and obviously the best choice is this one, the center one that is in Kumu, the font Kumu. So the thing is, all of these are now kind of communicating a different impression. All right, well, what if it was all caps? Okay, that's stronger in all caps, but it's still not as good. And we can take the italic styling off. Still not as good at conveying the idea of the future as the other font, the second font, Kumu. Let's go ahead and make this all caps. And we'll reduce it down. Okay. What if we make them all feel like they're relatively the same length? Would that make any difference in the impression? Probably not really. So even if we make them all feel relatively similar in size, the font in the center, the second one, Kumu, just feels more futuristic. It just feels better. So it's just a better fit for the idea that we're conveying. This is how important and how powerful just picking the right font for your video can be in terms of conveying the idea. Also knowing that you can use stylistic choices and elements to adapt and adjust your fonts. So knowing that, hey, I can apply something to this, like a slant or even an italic styling to make this much more interesting. And now this feels like better when it's like, oh, the future. Then watch this. We can do something called a color break. And we can go ahead and we can do something like this and pick a gold. And then this color break feels strong. That feels strong. So that feels a bit different. So color breaks can leave an impression with us in terms of how something works. Same thing with styling. Something as simple as a slant to the font styling. So again, I can also apply a transformation to this one, an angular transformation on slant to this one. And let's say I'm going to add a 20%. Nope, that's rotation. So I did not mean to do the rotation. I wanted to do something else. Give me a second here. Where is that menu option? All right. So even with that, it still doesn't feel as strong as the second one. So again, it's still not as powerful as just choosing the right font. We have a Canva for Creators course over at awesomecreatoracademy.com. Eventually, I will do some Canva tutorials, but you can apply most of the same principles that I'm teaching here to Canva, aside from the things specific on the photo editing and the painting and paintbrush side. Melly Cinco says, Roberto, I went to a UI UX school, and let me tell you something, Roberto, if I could go back in time, I would have just paid you $5K for a couple of sessions. Biggest regret. Thanks so much. No problem. Yeah, I try to teach things the way that I understand them, and sometimes it's better than the way I originally learned them, to be honest with you. The Stupendous Chumley says, Roberto, question. What do you think about people using more cartoon caption like bubble cloud quotes on thumbnails using 2 to 4 words? Just a grand notion I had. Chumley, I don't believe in grand notions. I believe in doing what works. So if I see something works, I try to focus on doing what works effectively. I try to disabuse myself of grand notions because the audience and the algorithm humble us all, my friend. So I try to avoid giving myself grandiose ideas. I've tried that before, and then when it doesn't work, I revert to simplicity. But it's worth trying it. You could A/B test things. You can see if it works, because it could work. Maybe it does. But often, if I don't see evidence for something, I go, okay, let me follow what the evidence says. Dreamer Gamer, $2 super chat. Hello, Roberto. Hello, Dreamer Gamer. Appreciate you. Motivation Theory Running says, I sourced a great photo for my last video that blew up on the first woman to finish the Barkley Marathon. Over 22K views. Nice. Congratulations on that. Yeah. But simple fonts work most effectively, and they make things easy to read. They make things very easy to read, and it's massively helpful in a lot of cases. Have you talked about generative fill AI tool? Not yet. I do want to get to that at some point, because I definitely could see a value to that. Let's see. So let me see here. Yeah, I definitely can see a value to things like generative AI fill and what they can do to extend thumbnails. I want to also teach you guys stuff about conceptual. Now, again, I know that to some degree, for some people, AI art is controversial. I totally get that. I understand where people are coming from, but we do have to talk about it because it is a thing that exists in the marketplace, and it is something people will have to contend with, whether they fully like it or appreciate it or not. I'm going to see what I can do about finding a couple of quick images of myself that I can use. I'll just go to my website and just go to my press page to get my images, so that I can use this as an example for you guys to show kind of somewhat recreating the concept of an Airac thumbnail. It's not going to be his exact thumbnail, but it is going to be a close approximation. Let me see. So what am I going to do? So just for a reference, just for a reference, in a minute here, I'm going to show you Eric's thumbnail for trapping like a bunch of influencers in a cube. And then you're going to get the concept here. So what am I doing? First, I'm going to remove myself from the background after I resize myself. So I'm going to say remove from background. So, okay. Actually, I don't like how that worked. It didn't work very well because it still cut out my hat. Let's zoom in here. I don't love that. So I'm just going to use the quick select tool to get the areas it missed. Okay, I think that did better. I'm not going to use generative fill here. What I am going to do, though, is I'm going to add a mask, which basically removed me from the background. I can clean that up later with some feathering. But for right now, just for concept, for quick concept for you guys, it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to get the job done to sell the story. So now I need a bunch of people trapped in a cube. I need a bunch of human beings, quote unquote influencers, trapped in a cube to recreate Eric's classic idea. Now, again, I know it's controversial. I know people hate it. But we're going to use generative AI for this. We're going to use generative AI for this. And the thing is, I have a couple of options. I could try to do it here in Photoshop, but I don't think it's going to be able to pull off this exact idea. After I do this other method I'm going to use, in theory, I could try it. But in the meantime, I'm just going to use Midjourney. And we're just going to give it the old college try, so to speak, right? So I'm going to copy and paste this image from Midjourney behind me. And it's a bunch of people in a queue. I'm going to try to see how it handles remove background. It did a terrible job. So guess what? So we're going to use another method that's not going to be nearly as fast, but is going to be cleaner. It is going to be cleaner, though. We're just going to kind of zoom in, and we're going to use the pen tool. And we're going to use the pen tool, and we're going to have path selected. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to eyeball this. This is not going to be perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm going to eyeball this so that we can create a mask, and we can cut this cube out in Photoshop, create a mask, get rid of our background. And this is going to be somewhat precise, somewhat imprecise, but it's going to get us a cleaner overall image than if we use another method, because once again, all the proof you need in the world that the AI, even in Photoshop, is not perfect because it couldn't select and find our cube and our people and do a good job. So now I'm going to do what's called make selection. So now it has the selection. Wait a minute. P. Where's my pen tool? So, right. So, and mask. And so what that did was that created a mask where I have this cube and I have these people. I'm going to now make that larger so that it kind of fits here conceptually. Got that. We're going to bring me down. I think I may add a drop shadow to me to just create some depth. Create a little bit more depth there. All right, cool. This, as you can see, is probably getting very close to Eric's overall thumbnail concept. We're going to make me slightly bigger here. And if you're like, when you say Arax thumbnail, Roberto, what are you talking about? I'm going to show you over on YouTube, the YouTuber Arax, and he has a popular, like, you know, I think it's two of these videos. I think it's two of these videos where he put people in a cube or a box or something like that. And basically, we're just trying to recreate that in this case. Now, again, they may have done some of this with photography and some of this with AI. Your biggest favorite YouTubers, their thumbnail artists are using combinations of photography and AI in this case. And I will do some retouching on this here in a minute, because there are things we can do to make this better by a lot. For one thing, we could definitely go and add a sharpen filter on this, and that will just clean that up just a little bit. We also are probably going to want to, on our overall image, do what's called a curves adjustment layer. We're not going to go crazy on that, because we're also not trying to totally ruin all of my natural skin tones, but we're trying to brighten some areas of it up. We definitely might want to reduce some brightness or exposure. So we'll just take that slider down just a little bit. Just a hair. And let me find this Arax thumbnail so that I can show you exactly what we're going for. So let me go to his YouTube channel. Let's see, scrolling. Again, you can see why poses directly matter. Here we go. So I trapped 25 celebrities in a box. Okay. So this one would be closer to 20 strangers. So we're going to say, whoops, strangers. And so again, this is not quite exactly a one-for-one. What I'm going to make and what I've made here is not a one-for-one duplication of this, but when you see close to conceptually the idea for this Arax thumbnail, it's not perfect because, again, I had no pre-planned photography, no models to work with, and I just did the quickest version I could in with Mid-Journey and generative AI tools, but I was able to recreate most of the concept from his thumbnail. Now, what would make this closer is if I did something like adding, for example, the outer glow effects that he's using in his. And so I would change this color here to get it to more of a blue, kind of like what he had. And so that has an impact there. Let's see. Yeah, so we created that blue that he had in there. It's not quite the same thing, like I said, because we can't create a exact perfect duplication of his thumbnail in this case because we don't have the staged situation of all the different influencers or photos of them. Now, if we were going to take this to an extreme, if we were going to spend the next hour just making Arax thumbnail, we probably kind of could. I am going to show you a little bit of something I can do that makes my thing feel a little bit more like his. So one thing I am going to do is I'm going to take a brush tool and I am going to create somewhat of a color casting effect on myself. I think I'm going to use color dodge for this. I think I'm going to try and see if 20%. No, I'm going to need more than 20%. I'm probably going to need like something like 8. Nope, 80 is too much. Actually, we're not going to use color dodge. We're going to use overlay. We're going to see, or maybe we should use soft light. We'll try overlay, and then we'll see about soft light. We definitely don't want hardness of that. We want closer to a hardness of 0 in the brush tool. And so the idea here, and this is not perfect, and it's not meant to be perfect. We're trying to create a little bit of an effect. We're not going to completely use outer glow all the way, because we're going to use a trick for it, and then we're going to fake some of it using the brush tool. But what we're going to do here is we are going to use a little bit of outer glow, but we're going to fake some of it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to change the interpretation of the range here. Then we're going to reduce the size, and can we do an angle with it? That's closer to what Eric has. It's a little closer. It's not perfect, though. It's not going to be perfect because we don't have the time. We can change the angle here. This is a little bit closer, but the thing is we don't have a light cast on me just yet. And what we kind of want, what we would hope for, is that maybe we can create an effect, and we might need to tweak this. Actually, screen might be the blend mode we want. Yeah, we want screen, but we don't want 80%. Maybe we do it in gradations of 20. The thing is, the problem with this is also my skin complexion will have a different effect for this than Eric's, but we want to create that, and that's probably too much. We want to pull it back probably to make maybe 30 or 40, and we can do it in gradations. But we want to create the idea that some of this blue light is coming off and hitting me a little bit, kind of like what was happening in his. And we want to kind of blend it a little bit with what's going on here. We can create another overlay layer probably as well for this box to make it feel a little bit more like what was happening in his thumbnail. Now, again, we don't have an abundance of time while we're working on this like he and his team have. They could have spent, for all we know, 3 hours just on this thumbnail, especially since they also had the luxury of getting individual poses from YouTubers. And what they did was they were able to make a cube, and then they were able to make the individual YouTubers and remove them from the background and put them together and pose them and size them. We do not have the luxury of that time in the stream. We would if we were going to spend 2 hours making one thumbnail. But as you can see, this is how we do some of the effects that your favorite YouTubers do. We use the screen layer and the paintbrush to kind of create these glow effects, these lighting effects. We can combine that with an overlay layer. So we have an overlay layer and we have a screen layer in Photoshop. And even when you're experienced, you do have to play with these things to get them to look and feel more of what you want. But this gets us a little bit close to Eric's concept and vision for his thumbnail. It is nowhere near perfect. It's nowhere where I would want it to be, but I'm doing like a super rough, super quick version of it versus really taking my time. I'm even doing a little bit of touch up in my face with the overlay, and you can see that that actually helps take some of the exaggerated brightness out of my face. So that's actually helpful. We can add a little bit more white catch lights closer into my eyes, and maybe that looks a little bit better there visually. If we had time, we wouldn't just brighten up my eyes, which is definitely a thing. We would also sharpen, but you can see immediately how some of those things make a difference just with us painting with light and how it stands out and how it's exaggerated, which makes it much more of a YouTuber style thumbnail. We could pull this back a little bit if we think it's too much. So we could pull it back by about to about 60%, because we could say, okay, that's too much. Then we could go in, make another overlay layer, and then in the areas that we do want it, like maybe on our box and what have you. We can go back in and make that a little more exaggerated, add some more depth to it that way. And so again, you can see conceptually that this is very close to Arax putting, you know, people in a box. So there you go. Lumino's star $4 super sticker. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you. Yep. So again, you can see what we were going for there. Callie Kameko says, would you apply these thumbnail principles to challenge bangers? How are they different? Well, again, this is where I was using Arac. Arac is kind of a challenge banger. So it's similar. You would use these techniques because the techniques we're talking about photography, we're talking about type, we're talking about design, we're talking about visual spacing, we're talking about contrast, we're talking about color theory. It doesn't matter what genre of thumbnail you're talking about. All of those things kind of matter. Is the box a real thumbnail before editing? In this case, it's generative AI, but in Arac's case, they either kind of photoshopped a cube or used a stock photo of a cube. And their method was they had individual photos of these influencers because they had a stage photo shoot because they had a bunch of big influencers and then they were able to Photoshop them in. We don't have 3 hours to work on this like his team did. So we can't Photoshop individual people into a cube over the course of 3 hours, because we just don't have time here on the stream for that, because I'd like to sleep at a reasonable hour. Oh, you mean channel banner, not challenges? Yeah, basic principles still apply to channel banners. I've done an entire tutorial on how to make channel banners. So yeah, a lot of the same principles apply. Adventure Explorer Discover says, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the font Carter 1, but I use that in all my thumbnails. It's not bubbly, but not basic either. Is that a bad choice? If your audience is responding to it, it's fine. The Red Gambit says, I've been working on a new thumbnail as this whole stream has been playing out. Thanks so much for the help. Absolutely. Yeah, this applies to channel banners too. The same principles apply. So hope that answers your question there. Let's see. I might use, let's see. I'm going to see if I can find a way to show you guys something like the head replacement technique. It won't be perfect in this case because, again, I just don't have the time to do it perfectly. But I do want to show you conceptually what the head replacement technique looks like. So let's see. So when I say replacing a head, I'm going to just real quickly, and this is just temporarily. I'm just going to use a sample image from Adobe stock. It's going to be an Adobe stock photo. I'm just going to use a sample image real quick. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be anything. I just want to show you guys the concept and principle of the technique so that you get an understanding for it. Let me get rid of all these other layers so that it's not as confusing. So let me just get rid of everything else in the background. I'll even get rid of the background itself. Okay, so the body and head replacement technique. The way that the body and head replacement technique, at least in theory, conceptually works is this. To make this simple, I'm going to go ahead and fully apply the layer mask to this. So basically, what I'll do here is I'll remove this guy's background just so that, okay, we have 2 figures here. And the goal here is we're going to put my head on this gentleman's body as close as we can. So how are we going to accomplish this? Well, one of the first things we need to do to accomplish this is we're going to have to get ourselves similar in size, and we're going to want to line ourselves up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the opacity on myself here. And maybe to make this easy on ourselves, we'll add a white background to make this easy on ourselves and to make it easy on all of you. We're going to turn my opacity down to like something like 50%. We're going to bring me to the front. And so we're going to line me and him up. And I'm going to try to get our neckline and our head size as close as possible and get us to match up as close as I can and get as much of this as accurate as I can and put some of our body features in the same relative position. Okay. And I know this looks weird and awkward, but bear with me. It's all going to make sense. Okay. So you can see what we're going for here. You can see what we're going for here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a duplication of myself just so I have myself as a reference. And just to simplify things, this is not necessarily what you want to do, okay? But to simplify things, I'm going to make a selection relatively of myself roughly with the lasso tool. And this is just rough. This is not meant to be exact. So I'm taking myself with the lasso tool. And I'm basically going to cut myself out here. So I have my head for all intents and purposes here. And once again, I'm going to use opacity to kind of line up myself with the gentleman here and kind of get us as close as we can. I'm going to zoom in for this. And again, this is awkward. This is a weird technique. I want make no mistake about it. This technique is really weird. Now, again, you can use things like AI adjustment fill. I'm just teaching you the old school manual way of kind of doing this. And we're just doing it roughly. We're doing it roughly. Okay. So relatively speaking, I think I've mostly got it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a duplicate of this guy just kind of, again, as a reference. I'm going to apply our layer mask so that he's just fully cut out. We're going to make, we're going to take away me for a minute here. And what I'm going to do is I'm basically just going to, for the most part, create a, where is it? I'm just going to create a mask. This is just a real quick, this is not the exact way you want to do this. I'm just showing you this for example purposes. So I'm just going to mask this guy out real quick. And I'm just going to take away basically his whole head here. Again, I'm telling you, this is not exactly how you're going to want to do it. Just bear with me. This is just teaching the principle of the technique. And the only reason we're just doing it this way is because I do not want to be here for another hour just on one image. That's the main thing. So we're just doing what you would call a quick and dirty version of this. We're doing a quick and dirty version of this. Okay. So clearly this is not fully matching up yet. That's okay. We're going to get to it. So what am I going to do? We're going to start, whoops, we're not going to paint there. We're going to go to the mask. What are we going to do? We're just going to start blending this in together here. Again, like I said, not intended to be perfect. This is not intended to be perfect. This is just a rough version of doing this. It is not meant by any stretch of imagination to be perfect and to be accurate and seamless in its entirety. But you can start to see how we would get there and how we could make this work. Now, again, I think that he's going to be a little bit like the body shape is not quite right. The body shape is not quite right because me and this guy are not exactly the same body shape. But again, I can get this a little closer, just a little bit closer to feeling right. Like I said, this is just a concept for you of how you could approach something like this in terms of the body swap and replacement technique. Now, there's a lot of skin blending, color tones, and other things we'd have to do. But from a concept standpoint, this is starting to get us about where we would need to be. Now, again, me and his skin tones are not the same. That's like a big part of this. Oh, crap. Sorry, guys. Sorry, guys. I didn't hit the screen share. The screen share did come up there. Okay. So here's the good news. I can use the history tool and go back a little bit for some of this. So yeah, I probably have to start over for a lot of this. Yep, I'll probably have to start over. That's fine. That's my bad. The joys of live streaming where you like goof and you have to start over again from scratch. My bad. I just spent the last 5 minutes showing you guys a technique without showing you guys a technique. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. All right, let's start over. It'll be fine. We'll just start over. Okay, let's grab. Let me see if I can find a better image than the one we were working with in anyway, because there might be better images. So give me a second. It's fine. I'm not too bothered by it. So I'm going to generate, if anything, instead of using a stock photo, I'm actually probably just going to generate an image of a guy who could theoretically have a pose that I need. With arms crossed. Yeah. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use a photo of me. I'm going to use a photo of me, and we're going to copy and paste a photo of me. So one of the first things we're going to do here is we're going to use a photo of me. We're going to create a white background. We're going to move that layer here. We're going to select subject. It missed my hat. So we're just going to use the quick select tool, grab that, and then we're going to mask, and that's going to cut me out from the background. We're going to apply that mask. And so now we have a cutout version of me. So we have a cutout version of me, and ultimately our goal is we want to just use our head. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something. It's going to be a little sloppy. It's going to be a little sloppy, but we'll bear with it. I can use the quick select tool, or I can use the lasso tool. We're going to just use the quick select tool here. And we're going to now select everything from my neck up, and we're going to create a mask. Then we're going to clean that up just a little bit. We're not going to try to make it perfect. We're going to, like I said, we're going to make this quick and dirty. And so we're going to use the mask tool. We're going to clean up just a little bit, just a touch. And so now, as you can see, we have me selected, and we have just my head and neck. Okay, so this is going to be helpful for us, and we're going to have that. And then once I have a body that I want to put it on, let's see. This would work better if I had a completely straight on image, if we're being honest. Because from an angle, actually, I think I have one that could work. His complexion is not quite a fit for mine, and we are going to have to mirror the image, but we can get it to work. This is fine. We can get this to work. So I have an image that I'm going to use here. We got this via Midjourney. So we've got this young man here. What we're going to do is we're going to, in Photoshop, we're going to actually flip horizontally. That way, this is going to line up better. Now, this is obviously not going to be perfect because he and I are not the same skin complexion. I'd have to fix that later in post. There's a lot here that probably isn't going to work perfectly. But what I'm going to try to do is I'm just going to try to do a rough concept to give you guys a general idea. This would take a lot longer if we were going to try to do it perfectly, because to do it perfectly, you do have to do things like match angles, colors. That's why straight on photos, if you have them to work with, are going to work a lot better. Actually, I don't even think I can work with this one, even with what I just did. I'm not 100% sure. Because it's just going to be so much of a mismatch, especially on the skin tones. This would be much easier working with people who have closer skin tones if I worked with two different people. Actually, maybe if I just work with two different images. Actually, maybe if I'm just teaching you guys the concept, actually, I might have a better way to do it instead of using one of my photos, because with my photos, the complexion thing is just going to keep being an issue. So I actually have an idea for this. This will work because I'll use these guys here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use this, and I'm going to use. Okay. So this is going to actually work a lot easier for us. So we're going to bring this one to the front. We're going to remove background. Okay. And so because at least the poses are similar, this is actually going to make our project a little bit easier. I'm going to duplicate this, and then I'm going to apply the image mask, and then I'm only going to select for this gentleman's head. So we use the quick select tool to do that. We're going to mask that. We can clean up the mask a little bit using a black brush on the mask layer, like we did before. Whoops. We're going to clean that up. Again, this is, like I said, this is going to just make my life easier because they're closer than if we use one of my photos. So to teach you the technique and the concept, I'm going to do this. Mr. Beast and his team do this kind of thing a lot. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to get the head sizes more accurate to each other. Now, one of the things you could do is you could eyeball this, but another technique you could use is you can use opacity or fill to make this transparent, and then try to get them to line up much more similarly, and to get the head size with things like the eyes, nose, or lips much more accurate and closer together. And then also look at where you want to align the neck and the overall neck size and angle to try to get it to work. So I think that this is actually going to be pretty close. Again, I know how awkward this looks with the transparency. Just bear with it. All right. So you can see how that's going to theoretically work. Now, again, we'll still need to blend in skin tones when we want to do this, but you can see how this is going to work. Now, in our layer of our original model, we're going to duplicate this also. And the thing is, we might be able to use generative AI fill to more or less erase this gentleman's like head from the equation. Whoops. From the equation. Let's see. Remove from image. edge. Kind of gonna see if generative fill can pull this off in terms of removing him. Nope. All it did was create a different head, which you could use with generative fill. I just don't feel like this worked out the way I would have preferred. But we have another technique we can use instead. I actually can use background, what is it called? Content-aware fill. So instead of using generative fill, I'll just use content-aware fill. So if I go to edit content-aware fill, that'll probably do most of the work for me. Not all, but it could do most. I may not like how it's coming out, though, in terms of that. We may not have time to refine it. I also do have another technique that will work for this, though. So there's another technique I can use here. It's less precise, but we'll still get the job done if we do it. So what I can do is I can just create an overall, and we'll deselect for now. We'll do this, and it'll be imprecise, and then we'll use background aware fill or content aware fill later, just fill in the background after we do this. But like I said, this is the thing we're doing from a perspective of more saving time than getting it perfect and doing it exactly the way that a big YouTuber's team or artist will do. So for now, we just need to get rid of most of this guy's head so that we can match this up, and we're going to fix it later. Because like I said, we can use content aware fill in post, and we'll also be able to fill in the rest of the background because I'm using a duplicate layer mask. So we're going to take our other gentleman here. And so with using that, I can go back and I can also fill back in areas that I do want or need a little bit closer in edge. And so this is not by any stretch of the imagination going to be perfect, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of a head replacement. It's just to show you the general concept behind the technique. In general, you'll want it to be much more refined than this. And it's not ideal. It's not ideal. But in terms of replacement and alignment, is this. Now, if you have perfect complexions, this is easier. But somebody else is going to have to like go back in after you do all of this and then get the complexions perfect and also erase anything that you don't want or that is an error or what have you. And then even with this, I have a trick here that I'm going to use. I'm going to use the lasso tool. Content, nope, not scale. I don't need content aware scale. I need content aware fill. Okay, and I don't love how that came out, but I have another thing that can fix that called the, where is it? Patch tool. Something like that. It's not perfect, but we're getting there. And again, this is a rough job just because, again, we don't have hours and hours and hours to go over this and to do skin tone merging and blending and all this stuff that we would normally want to do. Whoops. The purpose of this is just to give you a rough idea of how people are accomplishing this. But again, it takes a lot more, what do you call it? It takes a lot more work to get this to come out perfectly or anything near perfectly. Oh, wait, did we erase that? Yeah. And depending on the complexions that you're using, this becomes much harder to pull off. Depending on the complexions and skin tones of the models you're using, this becomes much more difficult or near impossible to pull off perfectly without hours and hours and hours of work behind it, which then could just be like, for all intents and purposes, a chore. Right. Let's see here. I don't think I have a really great method right now that would be fast at all for getting the skin tones right, because I don't think that we're going to be able to use hue and saturation or the adjustment curves to get it exact, because skin tones are a very precise thing. And we'd probably actually want to use the brush tool and use some form of color blending to do it. You can start to see how we can get like just a little bit closer than what we have, but skin tones are so precise that we'd probably want to and need to sample this, do some merging, do what do you call it? Do some clone stamping. There's a lot that we'd have to work on in order to accomplish what we'd want with this. We'd probably want to use some things like maybe the healing or spot healing brush, but we'd be sitting here working on it for quite a bit, because you can see it does work. When we do it, it does work to a degree, but you have to also be very finite with it in a way that we may not have the luxury of enough time to properly pull off. And we're being very imprecise here. And again, it's not near perfect. It's not anywhere near perfect. It's not what we would want in a final product. But this is just partly, like I said, for illustration purposes to see how close can we get if we try to do it. How close can we get this to something near to usable? Not necessarily 100% usable, but can we pull off the concept enough for you to kind of just like take the point of like, well, how are YouTubers doing this? Or how are their teams doing this? And again, this is why they get paid a lot of money, is because to get this perfect, we'd have to sit here for hours upon hours upon hours just to get this right. But conceptually, you can kind of see how it would get done. And again, I had like very little prep time to work with to do this and had to wing it. And again, you really have an easier time if you can get the complexions of the people you're replacing bodies on, the body doubles, as close as possible. Someone like Mr. Beast's team already has sourced these things, but I'll be real with you. A lot of them are leaning on generative AI. Aside from getting generative AI models to begin with, what I wanted to do was kind of show you how to manually approach this in Photoshop. But like doing this manually is, I'm not gonna lie, it's infinitely harder to do anything near perfect with this manually versus just using AI tools. But I also know a lot of you, and I get it, are resistant to using AI tools. Totally understand. But also you can see like where they would just make life so much easier. But like, you know, we got something that was like, you know, like we went from, which is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but we were just trying to do this as quickly as possible to illustrate a technique concept. It's not what I would take to any final version of a product. It's just something to illustrate that, okay, how does someone approach this? They line it up. But see, the muscle angle and all these things are wrong. It's easier with straight on faces like what Mr. Beast does, where you notice that in almost all of his thumbnails, they're not at an angle. They're straight on. But they also spent hours doing that. And they probably built the AI around his face by now. So like I said, it's not perfect. It's not what I would like personally like take to final. Now, I want to show you how generative AI might approach this differently. If I use probably the lasso tool and I select this gentleman and then I go to generative fill in Photoshop, generative fill has a prompt. I can say, young man smiling. This is probably going to look crazy. It's probably not going to come out great. They're still working on this, especially when it comes to people of color, but I've selected our guy here and I asked for variations of young man smiling. And again, I don't think it made it any more realistic in theory than I did. And again, I think that this is more uncanny valley. I don't think I'm in love with this. It is close though. And again, it's about as good as I was doing. So like this first one, not so much, but like these aren't terrible. So that's why people are using AI tools. But again, if you're against using AI tools, I understand. But in terms of swapping out heads, this is the difference that AI tools make and how fast it can do something and generate something. I'm going to have it generate a couple more variations real quick. That one's actually pretty good, to be honest with you. That one with the dreadlocks, that's actually pretty good. But look at how I was able to also change the whole angle and do the thing and everything like that. And that's what the generative AI tools in Photoshop are capable of in terms of generative fill. But again, your mileage may vary here. Your mileage may vary. And again, do I think it's perfect? No. I think it also is really rough for this when it comes to working with darker skin complexions and people of color. But again, the amount of time I would have to spend to do something that this does in a couple of clicks, it's night and day. It's night and day in terms of how quickly it can be done. So I did want to illustrate that. And I did want to show you guys that. I'm not on the full anti-AI train. I do want AI to happen or be used in the most ethical ways possible. Adobe is making some strides toward that. Some people, it's still not enough for them, or they have genuine concerns. So I totally get that. And I'm not just saying that or trying to virtue signal. I'm just like, I understand where people are coming from. I'm a pro technology guy. I am a enthusiast when it comes to tech. And I very strongly advocate for tech, but I also understand, hey, I think people should be allowed to opt out of their work being used for AI tools. If they want to opt out of it, I think they should be allowed to. And I think it should be made as easy as possible for them to be allowed to. And I think that that would be the right thing. And I think that if people want to sell their models to be used to train on AI, use their assets to be trained to train AI models, I think they should be fairly compensated for that. Yeah, with Adobe, you can't ask for something like a YouTube logo or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, if you're on Adobe, first of all, I don't know how you can be on Adobe Photoshop CS2 and have it functionally work. I don't know how that's even possible to have that functionally work on any type of hardware that's been made in the last couple of years. So I don't know how you're pulling that one off. Let's see. But yeah, that's Adobe's generative fill. Excuse me. Do you guys have questions about that and how the generative fill stuff works? How do you use faces that you want and not have to just make up faces? You can use sourcing, and there are tools that will change and adapt a face that you already have in source. This is what, God, what did they call it? They called it something. I forgot what they called that feature, but that's what Mr. Beast does, to where he was able to change the, that's how Mr. Beast was able to change the thumbnails he has, where he was mouth open all the time to just his mouth closed and smiling. Is they used a tool, an AI tool in Photoshop to accomplish that, where it works with the face you already have. I'm just trying to remember what it's called. I cannot remember what it's called right now. I'm blanking on the name. Excuse me. Sharkfin Tech has a question. Can at least some of these techniques be equally applied in a less intensive app than Photoshop, such as Canva, using AI or not? Love this tutorial. Appreciate all you do. Canva is not there yet. Canva is not even close to being there yet, unfortunately. So you can apply the typography techniques. You can apply the layout and placement techniques. You can apply basic color theory techniques, but not the AI stuff. The AI for Canva is not anywhere near as advanced to do that. Maybe in the future, because they have acquired, God, what is it? They acquired, what was that company? Affinity. They acquired Affinity, which was a competitor where you could buy the software forever, and it was a Adobe competitor. But that just means it's going to become subscription now, because Canva is a subscription too. So I get it. In the future, I might do a Canva tutorial here in the future, honestly. And that also could be a good pitch for the Canva for Creators course that we have with Awesome Creator Academy. It's a mini course that my co-instructor, Andy Rivera, made. She's great. She did a 4-hour Canva for Creators course that basically can have you master Canva. It's a $99 course we have on Awesome Creator Academy. So for people who are really into Canva, I'm going to go ahead and link to it. Give me a second. Yep. Found the link. There you go. Ultimately, yeah, but ultimately, Cadu Ribeiro says Adobe Express is being very solid with AI basics. Plus, you can generate most of the things with decent quality. Yeah, Adobe Express is accessible and affordable. It is comparable to Canva. I would say it's Adobe's competitor to Canva if Photoshop is too expensive or too overwhelming. But Photoshop's also only $10 a month. If you don't get the entire Adobe suite, Photoshop is $10 a month. Isn't that basically the same thing as Canva Pro? Isn't Canva Pro $10 a month? So Adobe Photoshop is $10 a month, and you get Lightroom with it, and you get cloud storage with it. It's like actually really legitimately good for the deal for the Photoshop Creative Cloud bundle, because you don't have to get everything in Creative Cloud. If you just get Adobe, it's $10. I think that most people here with the intent of being full-time content creators can afford a $10 a month subscription. I know they add up, but like it'd give you the most powerful tool. So just a thought there. I think even with that Photoshop bundle, I think you get the pro version of Adobe Express as well. But like I said, you can use the generative fill AI with Adobe Firefly in Photoshop to swap out the heads. There are ways. I think the thing is called expressions, is how they swap out Mr. Beast closed mouth for a smile, or his open mouth to a closed mouth smile, using that feature. And it's one of the more advanced features. I think it is some type of filter too. It's called neutral filters. Okay, so let's see here. Yeah, it's yep. Okay, yeah, it's called neutral filters, and there's some things you can do with this that are specific to things like faces. Give me a second. I know I saw it in here that it can do under Smart Portrait. Okay, yeah. So with Smart Portraits this is how you can change people's facial expressions. So this is how they're doing the Mr. Beast stuff. Let's see. It's processing. Yeah, right now it's processing, so it's going to make him look a lot less happy in a minute. So you see, it actually changed his smile significantly. It made him a lot less happy, but it's not perfect. And they have other expressions. So if I go here and then I slide down and then maybe I make him surprised. It's going to take a minute to process. We'll see how it works here. And again, it might be able to do a lot with his face. Let's see if we can do angry. I wasn't able to pull off angry too much, but that would be because his facial expression, his eyes aren't showing nearly as much. But you would see in theory how this would work. We might be able to try this on one of my faces. And so we might be able to see maybe a better example in theory. In theory, we might be able to see a better example. So we're going to go here. We're going to go neutral filters, smart portrait. Does it give us the option for that? Face is not detected. Hang on. What we'll do is rasterize image. Hang on. Where's the option to rasterize the image? There we go. All right, so we rasterize the image. We go to filter. We go to neutral filters. We open this up. We'll move this over just so you guys can see it more. It's not detecting my face. How is it not detecting my face? Do I have the wrong layer selected? No, I have the right layer selected. Wow, it really just doesn't like my face. Let me try something different, you guys. Bear with me. Let's try something. Do we have another image of me we can open up, maybe? I don't think the neutral filters can work on animals, but I do think that the God, what do they call it? I do think that the generative fill can work on animals and on animals. Let's see. Rasterized layer. Filter, neutral filters. Can it detect a face this time? All right, face selected. Excellent. So here you can see we can do different things. We can do skin smoothing. We can do all these things. Let's see what it can do. Let's see what it can do. All right, so let's make me a little younger. I doubt that'll be significant in terms of the effect, but we'll see. It says it's processing in the cloud. Yeah, I think that did make me a little bit younger. I think it like definitely took some of the age out of my eyes. So that's interesting. Let's see if we can tone up the facial expression for surprise. Let's see if that works. So it says it's processing. Oh, there's the YouTuber face. See, that's the YouTuber face. So this is how the AI works to make the YouTuber face. So let's make me much less surprised and a lot happier. Look at that. Even happier. Let's try even happier. Crazy, right? Crazy what that can accomplish. So again, now you know how Mr. Beast is doing it. Again, it's not perfect. It's not even close to perfect, but it is something. So again, you can literally change your smile, your facial expression. Let's see. Let's tone down all of that happiness and then not surprised. Let's see what it can do with making me angry. I don't know if it can pull it off. Kind of. It's not particularly good at that. Not with me, anyway. Let's see if it can make me into old man Roberto. So let's just jack the slider up to the extreme. Oh, yeah, that definitely turned me into old man Roberto. Let's see what the most extreme version of that is. Yep, that's super old man Roberto. Astatine says, what about some 3D effect epoxy max? We just don't have the juice to do 3D effects and do streaming at the same time. We just don't have the juice for that. That's definitely not going to work. It's a good question. It's just, yeah, we don't have the juice for that. Not while streaming. Yep. So, I mean, this is pretty cool. Let's go the complete opposite direction on the slider and just like, you know, super baby face. Let's see what happens. Oh, man. That puts me back at like high school. Sheesh. Yeah, Mr. Beast is doing a cartoonish level thumbnail, so it makes it easier for the AI because it's not really a real face anymore. It's a hyper exaggerated face where they basically have smoothed his skin completely, sharpened his eyes, made them pop, made them cartoonish and everything like that. So it's easier for the AI to manipulate it because it's already uncanny valley versus mine being photorealistic. So that is a key difference. I would agree with that. So Mr. Beast is doing that. Eric is doing that. Ryan Trahan isn't doing that as much. You know, several other creators. So I would agree with that. Some of this can also handle things like head direction. Like we'll just do a small version of that. And it changes it a little bit, but that was like, we didn't go extreme on it. Let's go ahead and go to the extreme. I don't love that. Let's try have it fix head alignment. Let's go that way. Oh, wow. It really did change and fix the angle. So now it's not so unnatural. So yeah, those sliders, the thing is powerful. This thing's incredibly powerful. So let's go back to neutral, basically. All right, so that, yeah, that changes it back to neutral. Yeah, so we can change all kinds of things. We can, you know, change things like light direction. So then we could light a different side of your face if it wasn't lit enough, so on and so forth. So again, really cool stuff here. And this is the worst that this technology is ever going to be, y'all. This is the worst this is ever going to be. In terms of how people are getting that perfect smooth skin in their thumbnails, look at this. This is what you could call basically the beautify filter now. So yeah. So those are just some of the more advanced tools in Photoshop when it comes to the AI and what it's capable of. They're doing wild things like the ability to colorize black and white photos. So it's just like crazy stuff. You can enhance the resolution dramatically with this stuff. I mean, it's just incredible, really. Photo restoration. This is going to be great for like anyone trying to fix and scan old family portraits and things like that. So really cool stuff. But yeah, so now you just have a sense of how some of these more advanced things are being done. And again, if you have Photoshop, it's $10 a month and you get access to that $10 a month for Photoshop. And that's why it's so powerful. And that's why everybody uses it. Now you know why the big YouTubers are using Photoshop. Also, you know why AI is becoming so powerful. Look at all the things we were able to do with AI that would have taken me ridiculous amounts of time to do manually. Astatine says, what if you're doing a food thing and add a drink with a straw? Could you make the AI look like you're drinking from the straw? The odds of that coming out great right now are not good. I'll be honest with you. Right now, probably not. Not in an effective way. Not that looks like you and looks accurate, but give it another 2 or 3 years. Give it another 2 or 3 years, and it absolutely will probably be able to do craziness like that and do magic and put you in any scenario and make it look realistic, which is where it'll become crazy with deep fakes. And I mean, it's already kind of getting there for public figures, but yeah, in a couple of years, you'll be able to do that. Astatine 85, but not right now. It's just not quite there yet. And maybe it's a good thing that it's going to take a minute for it to get there, because it's going to get too dangerous after a while. And we just have to be mindful, because as cool as this is, and we're just using it for fun and we're using it to make our videos and stuff like that, there's a lot of wild implications of how this stuff can be used unethically. So just be aware of that and know that, future is interesting. Very, very, very interesting. But yeah, out of my agenda of the things I wanted to cover, what did I cover? So we showed you the head replacement stuff. We showed you the AI tool stuff. We showed you typography. We learned all about color theory. We learned about photography. We broke down some of the biggest YouTubers' thumbnails. We broke down some small YouTubers' thumbnails to give you good examples. All in all, I do feel like this was a very good workshop, and we covered a lot of the basics. And we covered advanced stuff too. Creatively Miss Me says, decorating on a budget, says, I have a home decor channel. I'm trying to figure out thumbnails. It's difficult for me. If it's home decor, I would do before and after thumbnails using photography. I would focus on photography, and I'd use before and after project thumbnails, which is just to divide down the middle, before, after. I would keep it simple. So yeah, I think this is a good place to end it with the workshop. I think we covered a lot. There's more I could say and do on thumbnails. One day I want to do a workshop where we actually do the photography behind the thumbnails, and where I do staged photography. And the thing is, in future workshops, what I think I'll do is, in future workshops, to make it easier, instead of trying to do it from scratch in real time, I'll pre-prepare some assets where, like, maybe what I'll do is I'll literally shot for shot recreate the photography behind some YouTubers' thumbnails, do a photo shoot shot for shot, and then basically try like having made their thumbnails already from scratch and listing out the techniques on paper. I'll bring the finished product and then kind of walk backwards from the finished product of what we did to remake that YouTuber's thumbnail. So I think that that'll be incredibly helpful. We can do a lightning round real quick where I can answer some of your last questions real quick for anybody who has them. We'll take like maybe 3 or 5 real quick questions if anybody has them, and you can get those in right now while I try to hit some more of my protein shake. Too much peanut butter, not enough banana. Let's see. Doesn't look like we have any more questions in the chat in terms of the rapid fire questions, or maybe, guys, it's taking a minute to get them in. But guys, a couple of more minutes to get in the rapid fire questions. I think what I'll do is while I'm waiting on you for the rapid fire questions, I'll break down. I'm going to open up one of my favorite thumbnail sets of my own, of my custom thumbnails. And I will break down how I did them. Let's see. Actually, this one's really good. I think this has close to 50,000 views. I think this thumbnail is close to 40 or 50,000 views. So this could be a good explainer of why it works and why I did it. So let's see. Oh, we have a question. Ask the Teen says, you mentioned opting out. What about opting in with reference to your original work? Yeah, I think that there's things underway to make that possible and ethical for AI. Miss Creative Me says, I would love for you to have that thumbnail workshop. Yeah, absolutely. We will revisit this topic again at some point, and we'll do that. It'll take a lot more work on my part, but I think it'll be worth it. Oh, excuse me. What about kids channels ages 0 to 5? Same rules apply, AJ. Same rules apply. Same rules apply. Whatever Wavy says, when you see your best times upload on YouTube, should you upload a few minutes or hours before that or at peak time? Peak time or maybe 30 minutes to an hour before. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to break down why this particular thumbnail is actually winning for me and why it's getting a decent amount of views. So one of the things that works for this thumbnail really well is at a glance. Like I said, visually interesting at a glance. Visually attractive and then interesting at a glance. So if we go to the vibes framework, okay, and then we look at this thumbnail, we know that, all right, social proof at the end there, YouTube play button's the social proof. Visually interesting, the eye-catching elements, the YouTube logos floating around are the eye-catching elements. Boldness and contrast has it in spades. So this is visually attractive. This immediately gets your attention. This is visually attractive, has the right things going for it. Then it's interesting at a glance. Then it's got boldness and contrast. It has eye-catching elements, and it has social proof. It has everything it needs. It checks all 5 of our boxes. That's why this thumbnail is getting like 40, 50,000 views for me. AJX thumbnail ideas for a kids channel. Whatever Kids Diana Show is doing. Whatever Kids Diana Show and Like Nastia are doing, that's your thumbnail ideas for a kids channel. Heck, to a degree, even Mr. Beast. That's really what you need to know. I mean, it's not more complicated than that. But yeah, so again, like I said, this thumbnail, it seems simplistic because it's not even that many layers in Photoshop. It's the individual layers for the icons. It is the blue background. I considered an optional red background for this. And you could say the red pops, but I just don't feel it has the same contrast as the blue with the red YouTube logos. So again, red would pop and would get attention, but I ultimately went with blue because I just felt like the contrast was stronger with blue. I felt like it was too much red overpowering it potentially. So I went with that. We used an overlay instead of having just a flat background. We used an overlay of a kind of textured background there, a digital textured background. I thought about, oh, do I want to try a graph? Do I want to do this or that? I was like, nah. We made that even more contrast by using a curves tonal adjustment layer. There were elements that we needed to make pop. And I decided to use a color dodge layer to put some light casting effects here to just make it more dynamic and make it interact with me more. And what else? We used a clipping mask with a curves layer on me to make me pop and not feel as flat and to really bring out my skin tones. And so you can see the actual skin tones I have on camera and then the skin tones in the thumbnail. You can see that's close to accurate skin tones. So we did all of those things And then in terms of the fonts and the text for this, the font for this, I think, is going to be Futura Bold. Yeah, it's Futura Bold with a faux italic on it. So we made the font slightly slanted via italic and bold. We put drop shadow, heavy drop shadow behind it. A heavy double, heavy drop shadow. And so, yeah, that made all of this work and come together. And this was one of my more effective thumbnails. I do think the title obviously helped in terms of starting a YouTube channel and so on and so forth. But I think the title thumbnail combination was strong for this. I think it was really strong. I think it was super effective. And so this hits all of our notes in our Vibes framework. This is the Vibes framework. This is something I teach the pro group members in Awesome Creator Academy. I also share some of this with you guys, but this makes thumbnails clickable. It has to be visual, attractive, interesting at a glance, and interesting at a glance means storytelling. Bold text and high contrast colors, eye-catching elements, and ideally some part of social proof. Yeah, you can't add your own thumbnails on YouTube Shorts if you upload them from desktop. You need to transfer desktop to mobile, and then you can do it in mobile. Social proof is something that is authoritative or validating. So the social proof in my thumbnail is the YouTube play button. In another thumbnail, it might be cash money. So it could be an award, cash money. It could be, if in gaming, it could be trophies or award status, trophy pushing, big numbers. Big numbers can be a thing. If it's a prank or a stunt, it's big numbers for sure. It's anything that conveys status. Social proof is just another way of status. Social proof is status. Anything that conveys status, anything that conveys accomplishment, anything that conveys authority. Ask the team. I did a lot of things. I did photography. I did graphic design. I did advertising. I worked at an ad agency, did marketing, worked in web design. Go watch the video. There's a how I got started video. There's a how I got started video on my channel. I do them every year. If you are relatively new or unfamiliar with me, just go watch my how I got started video, and it'll basically explain my background. That, or just look me up in LinkedIn. Like, oh, yeah, I mean, a good way to understand me is like, literally, if you go to the About section of my YouTube channel, I did something interesting with the About section of my YouTube channel. In the About section of my YouTube channel, I list my real world accomplishments. So if you want to get an understanding of, like, if you want to some degree a better understanding of me or any kind of credentialing, let's say, and you want to know, well, like, why is he credible or what has he done in the real world? I listed my real world accomplishments in the About section of my YouTube channel. So all you have to do is click on the About section of my YouTube channel, and I listed, I think it's like 15 or so of my real world accomplishments. So, yep. Where did I learn stuff? Mostly independent. Mostly independent. I went to a community college, and I'm kind of old compared to some of you. I went to college back in 2002. I'm turning 40 this year. I know I don't look it. That's called good, clean, healthy living. So I'm turning 40 this year. I went to college at community college back in 2002. This was like when the Photoshop Creative Suite CS1 just started. So like, this is way back in my day, in the good old days of, not even YouTube didn't even exist back in my day. Like, so yeah, I was a grown adult before YouTube ever like existed. Yeah, Astin, I know you weren't insinuating I hadn't done it professionally. You're just curious. Yeah, no, I get it. Penta, I already gave advice on gaming thumbnails. Go watch it in the replay. I did a pretty extensive part on gaming thumbnails. You can watch it in the replay. What was I saying though? Yeah, so back in the day, I learned all this stuff before YouTube ever existed. I learned the hardware and software side before YouTube ever existed. I started coding at 13 years old. I learned Photoshop as a teenager in high school. I started video editing in high school, probably, I think, 8 years before YouTube ever existed, 6 or 8 years before YouTube ever existed. YouTube didn't come out until I was like 22, 23, something like that. I was an early adopter to social media, YouTube, video editing, all of it, technology in general. I was building websites for small businesses and churches as a teenager in my small town at the time in North Carolina. I taught myself a lot of this in college because my professors did not know software. They all came from traditional media backgrounds, print media mostly print media. Digital media was new in 2002. Most of them did not have a grasp of it. I learned the technology faster than my professors did. So they really weren't able to teach me much outside the traditional principles, which was important. And they were to teach me industry jargon. They were to teach me the concepts, but it was mostly analog, which by today is outdated and completely unnecessary because it was outdated then. It's certainly outdated now and unnecessary. I learned more than they did about the software. And I'm not saying that to be facetious or arrogant. I mean, it's a product of the time. You have to understand what the world was like 20 years ago to really grasp that. Smartphones didn't even exist. Cell phones were uncommon. Google was young. YouTube didn't exist. Social media didn't exist. MySpace didn't come along until 2004. Like people really, no, those churches wouldn't still have my websites live. This is over 25 years. This is over 25 years. A lot of those places probably still aren't even around or anything like that. Half of them probably got wiped out during the hurricanes. It's been 25 years. Like nothing I did 25 years ago is probably still around, or even 20 years ago. Not in the internet for sure. I mean, it's just, that's not realistic. That's just not a thing. It's just not a thing. The world was so different 20 years ago. You guys have no idea. Like the world was radically different. Technology was different. None of these things. There were no smartphones. And even when smartphones came out, apps were not a big thing and norm. And a lot of them were clunky. YouTube as a website was clunky as hell 15 years ago. It was clunky as hell 8 years ago. 8 years ago even. We didn't have half of the things you have in YouTube analytics now. We didn't have click-through rates. We didn't have the retention rate graph. We didn't have none of it. None of this stuff existed. The YouTube mobile app wasn't built into 2018. YouTube came out in 2005. The YouTube mobile app didn't come around until like what, 13 years into YouTube's existence? And it was in beta back then. The Studio app was in beta back then. It didn't even become good until 2020. The partner program didn't come until 2008, and it was invite only. It didn't open up to everyone until about mid to end of 2012 when it started rolling out to everybody. Then in 2017, they restricted it to where you had the subscriber requirements. So it was only 4 years of a free-for-all, basically 4 or 5 years of a free-for-all. The internet was a wildly radical place before YouTube and before Google really started popping, when Yahoo ruled the internet. And that's the era that I come from. Yahoo used to be the most important website in the world. I don't think a lot of you have any idea. For some of you, I've been doing this all longer than you've been alive. I mean, I know, again, I sound super old, but it's real. I've been doing this for longer than some of you have been alive. I've been using some of these software tools longer than you've been alive. Photoshop, I've been using Photoshop for over 25 years. I was using Photoshop 6.0 before it was ever into CS. I was using Photoshop 6.0. I was using Premiere 6.0 before it became Premiere Pro version 1. It was Premiere Pro 6.0 before it was Premiere Pro 1. Then it went to Premiere 1. Then it went to, I think, 1.5. Then they did CS Suite. They did Creative Suite. Creative Suite predates Creative Cloud. A lot of you wouldn't know that. So it was Creative Suite. It was for Creative Suite all the way up to CS6. Then it got moved to Creative Cloud. That happened in roughly, I want to say 2000. Oh God, Creative Suite moved to Creative Cloud in 2010, I think. I'm so old that there was a thing called Adobe Image Ready, which none of you would know about. Oh no, I'm not like, yeah, I'm not young. Like I was before CS. You're young. I was like, get good, dad. You're young. I was before CS3. I was before they ever had Creative Suite at all. Photoshop 6.0 with Adobe Image Ready. I was there before Adobe acquired Macromedia, and that's where you got Flash. Adobe acquired Macromedia, and so that Flash and Dreamweaver all and Fireworks all belonged to Macromedia, a competitor. I also remember using Corel Draw back in the day, and you led Photo Impact and Corel Paint. I'm like old. I remember when 56K modems were fast and a thing called dial-up. So yeah, this is the whole thing. So like, there was this company called Macromedia. They were a competitor to Adobe. Adobe acquired them and merged with them. This happened in the 2000s, and that's where Dreamweaver, Fireworks got discontinued much later. I miss it. Fireworks was actually really good. Flash, now called Adobe Animate. Steve Jobs ended up killing Flash. I was a Flash developer. Writing ActionScript back in the day. So yeah, I was doing ActionScript coding. So whole thing. Yeah, Corel used to make all kinds of software back in the day. Corel was a good company. It still is. Corel's still a good company. And I remember when I was doing print and I was doing billboard stuff, I had to learn, God, what was that thing I had to learn? Quark Express. I had to learn Quark Express. My boss was a big fan of Quark Express. I converted almost all of our projects to Adobe InDesign from Quark Express, which was a nightmare, by the way. But it was really good as an experience and everything like that. But I learned to hate Quark Express with a passion, and my boss loved it. I'm an Adobe InDesign. I'm Adobe Ride or Die for life. I'm Adobe Mafia out here. I'm Adobe Mafia, like I for life. Nah. I can use other things. But yeah, Quark Express, hated it with every fiber of my being. Adobe InDesign was a much better layout program. Not even close. I will say though, as much as I like Adobe Illustrator, I do think that as a vector image program, that Corel Draw was better as an vector image program, if I'm being honest. I also, back in the day, I used AutoCAD back in the day. I was considering going into architecture. No, there wasn't. There weren't really conversion scripts that were effective back then. There weren't really effective conversion scripts. This is like way back when. That wasn't really as much of a thing as it is today. They did not work very well when you tried them because we were in the early versions of them. So that was not very helpful. Yeah, I loved Adobe Fireworks. It was really good. But they folded and incorporated most of the features from Adobe Fireworks into the modern versions and iterations of Adobe Photoshop. So there was that. Yeah, Corel Word Perfect was the bomb. I agree. Corel Word Perfect was good. I like that. Yes, I remember watching videos with Real Player. I remember Real Player. I remember also Windows Media video formats. I remember ASF video formats. I remember FFmpeg, FF encoder. I remember Virtual Dub. Yeah, I'm OG. I'm an OG. But before we had YouTube, we were watching videos using a thing called Real Player, and we were also using Windows Media Player back in the day. So we were doing that. There was Winamp. Remember Winamp? So we had Winamp, we had Windows Media Viewer and Windows Video Player. We had WMV files, we had ASF files, and we had Real Media files, which was RMV files too. So like, yeah, it was a whole thing. And that's how us old school editors learned about encoding. And we learned about bit rates and codecs back then. You had to know all that. Now, none of you have to really worry that much about that. Unless you're a streamer, you don't have to think about that. And most of y'all don't even think about that as streamers anymore. Most of y'all just do it all on your phone. But like, we were really about it back then. We had to learn transcoding. We had to learn bit rates. We had to learn container files. We had this thing called MKV files back then. Yeah, I'm a tech head. I'm a real tech head. Like we had MKV files back then as container files in the early days of MP4s. So that was a whole thing. It was a whole thing back then to be savvy about this and to really understand it. There's a whole underground community of online video professionals in message boards and chat rooms. Some of you in the chat know about this and sharing the information. And some of you remember FFmpeg servers, where you would use that to convert your video files. Some of us remembered the old YouTube that was done in Adobe Flash and how the back end was running FFmpeg servers and doing the transcoding for our video files back in the day, in the super, super olden days of YouTube, before it moved to HTML5, I want to say. YouTube was running on Adobe Flash, then it moved to HTML5, I believe it was 5. It wasn't HTML4. HTML4 wasn't dynamic enough back then. A lot of the stuff was running on what we used to call LAMP architecture. They still call it LAMP architecture. Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, and typically Python. So that's how a lot of this stuff was developed. Almost all of your favorite social media platforms were originally developed as open on open source architecture, which was LAMP, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, and Python. And so they would run these server instances for that. They would write cron job scripts to do a lot of the automation backend. They do dual sandbox environments. It was a whole thing. And that's why this was able to be built by teenagers or college grads out of their dorm rooms or out of the garage. In the case of Larry Page and Sergey Brin, founders of Google, they did this in Susan Wojcicki's garage. Susan Wojcicki encouraged them, once Google was up and running, to acquire YouTube in 2006 from the three creators. It was Jawed, it was Chad Hurley, and Stephen Chen, three early PayPal employees. PayPal Mafia. So they had left PayPal. They were young. Google acquired them, and Google, those founders were young too. And that was Larry Page and Sergey Brin. The former CEO before Neil Mohan was Susan Wojcicki. She was like employee number 13 at Google. They founded Google in her garage, renting out her spare space. She was in the advertising world. She helped broker the negotiation with DoubleClick. DoubleClick then got the acqui-hire of Neil Mohan. Well, when they bought DoubleClick, when Google bought DoubleClick for their advertising appliance, in that acquisition hire, they got Neil Mohan, who's the current CEO of YouTube. So he was one of the heads over at DoubleClick, and that's how they got him. I think Susan Wojcicki's sister ended up marrying Sergey Brin, and she's the founder of 23andMe. There's a lot of interconnectivity across the tech ecosystem and tech founders that you all don't know about in the history of the internet. I might be something of an internet historian. I can tell you a lot of the history of the modern internet as we know it. And it's really interesting to just do the intersection of all of the relationships that built the founding of YouTube and Google and all the other acquisitions of the companies that built it, the interconnectivity of the relationships with other companies in the tech and entrepreneur world. It's all, I mean, for me, it's fascinating, but for y'all, it might be boring. I don't know. Yeah, no, I can go on and on about like the history of the early internet. Maybe one day we'll do that on a stream or something like that. Maybe I'll even bring on some people who were kind of there at the time. But yeah, I mean, I think this stuff is really cool. I'm a big old nerd. I love it. I think this stuff is really dope. You know, so I could talk about it forever. But we do have to run. It is 10 p.m. over here on the East Coast. So it's been a blast. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for coming to today's little thumbnail workshop and for staying for a bit of internet history and learning a little bit more about my past and my life and times of the things that I care about. We'll be back this Friday for another FAQ Friday. We'll be covering analytics stuff. We'll be talking about the algorithm. We'll answer questions about content strategy and ideation and more. So be there, be squared. I will see you next time. We're going to close out, of course, thanking our sponsors. We have a bunch of lovely, lovely sponsors for the stream. We have our good friends over at Streamyard, who are allowing us to multicast to Facebook Live, Instagram Live, oh, sorry, not Instagram Live, LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, Twitch.com, X.com, formerly Twitter, and Kick.com. So thanks to our friends at Streamyard for making the best and easiest, simple streaming software solution there is. If you want to be a streamer, make sure you're checking them out. Link is in the description down below. Perfect for live streaming, podcasting, webinars, and all of your live streaming needs. We also have our good friends over at OpusClip, the ultimate AI tool for repurposing your long form to short form. You can get them in widescreen and vertical videos, and you get captioning, animated captioning for your videos to spice them up. And they also have an AI B-roll tool that can also take some of the editing off your plate for your short form. So make sure you're checking out our friends at OpusClip, link in the description down below. Get a free trial of all of these things. Last but not least, thank you to our friends over at Kajabi. Kajabi allows us to not be digital sharecroppers and build our own online business, email list, marketing, and more. It's a one-stop shop. It's where I built my $5,000 a month membership website, Awesome Creator Academy. So we have the Awesome Creator Academy Pro Group thanks to Kajabi. I've been with them 6 years. It's helped me build a great source of revenue off platform that I don't have to split with YouTube, making sure I'm not a digital sharecropper. So make sure to check it out, Kajabi. If you're an online educator that wants to build courses, communities, cohorts, or do coaching, make sure you're checking out Kajabi for all your online business needs. Link in the description. Get a free trial. Tell them Roberto sent you. Anyway, it's been real. Would love to stay and talk more, but I do have to run. I have to do a little bit more work tonight on the renovations in the basement, building out the library down there. Want to make sure I also get a good night's sleep. Got to wake up early and do some coaching in the morning. So it's been awesome. I will catch you guys next time. Really appreciate you. We're going to end the stream with, of course, my book trailer. If you haven't read my book, it's called Create Something Awesome, How Creators Are Profiting from Their Passion in the Creator Economy. It's an Amazon bestseller. I'm really proud of it. If you want to support, buying the book is a great way to do it. And you get a little bit of knowledge and something physical you get to keep from me. So link is in the description. You can also find it on Amazon, even just by typing in my name. So let's do the book trailer. Stay awesome. And I will see you on Friday for another FAQ Friday live stream. And then, of course, as per usual, we'll be doing Monetization Mondays, Workshop Wednesdays, and FAQ Fridays. Stay awesome. Bye. I finally did it. I finished my book, Create Something Awesome, How Content Creators Are Profiting from Their Passion in the Creator Economy. The book is available now in paperback and in Kindle, where you can read it on any e-reader or device. And I'm really excited about this. The audiobook is coming soon, probably October 2022. Oh my God, it's so great to be able to have this book done put it up on the bookshelf, and to know that all of you who appreciate it, you want to hear what I have to say about the creator economy, becoming a full-time content creator, and what the experience and lifestyle of being a content creator actually is like. This is the book. I put 20 chapters in here of the most important things I think that content creators could be focusing on today. I talk about the mental health aspect of being a content creator, getting discouraged, imposter syndrome, not charging what you're worth, and mostly actionable advice around monetizing your content properly, but also how to build an audience on your authenticity and what it's really like to start from zero, even today. So if you're interested, make sure you're checking out the book. You can order it on Amazon. You also probably order it in a lot of other places like Barnes & Noble, and it will be coming to other bookstores soon. Really excited about it. Thank you for all the support and love around the book and the positive reviews. Now go ahead and pick it up and make sure you go out there and create something awesome today. Take care.